show starts, says the man. And let's start the show.
Let's get it going. Happy Sunday, familia. I am Almega, joined by my usual suspects, the one and only Dave Elliott and Chris Buse. What's up, muchachos?
Guten Tag, guten Tag. Hello, guys and girls.
Hello, hello, hello.
Guten Tag is good afternoon.
Guten Tag, it's good morning. Is it good morning or good day?
You can say it the whole day. It's good day.
Oh, guten Morgen. That's it. Guten Morgen.
But guten Morgen is good morning. Here we go. Welcome to German 101. That's what you all tuned in for, didn't you? Guten Tag. Please speak now. Yeah, seriously.
How you guys been, man? How you guys been? We got a hell of a topic. You guys ready?
Yeah. Yes, ready to kick some ass and take some names. Hello.
I've had friends message me. A friend of mine messaged me, and he sees the pictures like, "Oh my God, are you guys really gonna try and tackle that?" It's like, yo.
Yeah, we do. Bring on the haters, please. Come on.
Well, I think as this podcast goes on, you're going to realize that there's more than one way to skin a cat by the title of this podcast. So it's well. If you go by the visual imagery, that's one aspect of this podcast, but there's going to be a whole other part that we're going to talk about. So,
definitely. We are not going to smack you over the head with a female Thor. We will, but not right away.
Excellent. First, folks. I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I was just going to say, we're going to slap you, biatches.
Yeah. Well, you can all, I mean,
or as we say in England, I say, we're going to slap you, bitches, you know?
You want to have a fag. But in a way, even though we didn't plan it that way, but it kind of organically grew up. This topic kind of organically grew out of the topic we discussed on an irregular podcast Tuesday, 2 weeks ago, or something like that. We talked about this column Jen Kahn had published, where she said, well, basically, she was accosted by a retailer, not a wholesaler, saying, well, why don't you guys cancel books quicker when they're not selling? And she said, oh, we try to fix the books, and here's how we do it. We make changes to the books. And I thought about this topic, and if you look at this changes in the comic book industry, there's different reasons why characters change, and we talked about this also in private, Dave and me. And there are several reasons why things change. I mean, the world changes, that's one, but you can say, okay, we changed a comic book because it's not selling, because we have a new idea from the market, but then maybe the creator wants to try something new. And the fourth reason, which I find quite shocking, we'll talk about this later, is also because when you look in the mirror, you're changing too. And all of a sudden you want your characters to be older because that more or less reflects you. Or you try to show that you're still cutting it with the young crowd. Therefore you change things. I will give you an example for that, which I find very interesting. And so changes are all around. And if you come back to what we talked earlier in jest, that go on YouTube, you will enter female Thor, enter Black Captain America, and you will find 20 videos and you will get them on your recommended list for Kingdom Come, who talk negatively about these changes. Say, oh, the world is ending, now Captain America's a black guy or an African-American guy, Thor's a woman, how dare they? They're ruining my childhood, la-di-da-di-da, you know, all the song and dance. But at the end of the day, if you go back through the history of comic books, comics have always changed, comics have always evolved. And the image you see here on the screen, they are of a more recent nature, sure. But if we will show you more images, where we say, oh, well, basically this is also a change. But in hindsight, coming to it later from a first point of view, people have come to accept it. Do we know what the reactions were back then? I don't know. Maybe you can go back and read some letter columns, and I've done so. And sometimes people are quite negative, and sometimes they're quite positive. One thing we didn't put in here was the changing of the costumes of the Legion of the Superheroes. There were people complaining, oh, they're showing too much skin. Yeah, that's also a change. Other people liked it. Well, go figure it out.
Yeah, to each their own.
Hail Hydra.
Hail Hydra. I should have included that one. I didn't. I knew I was missing someone. But here we go. So, can you spot the change? Can you spot the change on the cover? Sure you can, because before Robin showed up, Batman was a dark loner. He was a bit an unsocial prick when he put on the cape and cowl. He killed guys. He kicked them in the face. And then you had Robin, and things got brighter. If that's not change, I don't know what change is. I mean, clearly this was done as a marketing ploy because you have young readers, you want to give them somebody to identify with. And to this day, the writers, Jerry Robinson also said, well, we gave Batman a sidekick because we didn't want him to talk to himself all the time. So here you have a reason why there's a Robin. But at the end of the day, once you add a Robin, once you add a little boy, and your name is not Frank Miller, everything changes, everything becomes very lighter. And that's what happened.
It's also an in. So if you want to expand your audience, and you've probably had maybe a slightly older audience picking it up, but you want the younger audience as well, add that younger kid that represents them into that mix. Yeah, so you expand your readership.
And that's something that's still done to this day. I mean, if you look at the animated universe, for example, you have these awesome shows, big robots, for example. You always got to toss in a little kid in there somehow. Star Wars Bad Batch, got to have a kid in it. Why? Come on, man.
Oh, look, it's like Evangelion.
Boring.
You look at Evangelion, it was like it just happens to turn out that not everyone can pilot these giant robots, and turns out the best person who can pilot these robots better than anyone else happens to be a young kid. And it's just like, and what do? It's like, it's when you're talking about life and death, it's like, well, we don't really want to put kids into war, but damn it, this kid's the only person that can pilot this ship or can pilot this robot better than anyone else.
Yeah, it's kind of endless game.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly what I'm thinking of. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's it kind of brings a lightness to everything. And I mean, sure, you can say, oh, I can see a homosexual undertone here, but that was really not the intention. I mean, it's a father and his son, and he was an orphan like Bruce was an orphan, and so there was this sort of camaraderie. And you saw sidekicks it took on. You saw sidekicks with Captain America. Captain America got Bucky as a sidekick in his first issue, which basically is around the same time. And then Green Arrow, in the original story, it's Speedy who lands on the island first. We talked about this. Yeah. And many people do not know this. And it was Oliver who was the playboy who was bored, but Speedy who put him on a straight and narrow, and said, well, basically, here you go, let's do this hero thing instead.
I mean, I guess just to touch on the kind of sort of the gay aspect of Batman and Robin, it's when you think about it, you go back to that time, like even before then, what about Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy? In Britain, you had comedians like Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise. There would be sketches or films, short films of all of these, and there's always that moment. It's like, oh, well, they book a room for the night and they get into bed together, in the same bed together.
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's no sort of like, oh, funny, ha, ha, ha. It's just, no, that's the way it is. And it was accepted, and that was fine.
I mean, it's also, I mean, we also need to look back at the time. And I mean, it's not very interesting, not very popular to say, they did it also in the past, but they did it in the past because basically you had clubs in the 1930s where you had transsexual performers live on stage. I mean, these were speakeasies. People were drinking. I mean, I told you about this. People were running illegal booze, and there were performers who dressed half as a man, half as a woman. That was very popular. It only died out when it became more mainstream. And people said, oh, you can't really do that. Why? Why couldn't you do this? And here we have in comics, you have Speedy using the shower after Oliver uses the shower, and they're still in the same room. Nobody thought anything by it. Maybe there was some homosexual thing going on, but at the end of the day, they were friends. I mean, it's also, you can say it's a natural thing. Why not?
I think the other aspect of it is that you have to understand that it was also in a more innocent age. Like, there were entire communities where if you'd actually said to someone, oh my God, it's like, Eric and Ernie are sleeping together in a sexual way, and they'd have gone, what? 2 men? No. It was that.
Yeah.
Remember, it was not talked about. Like, there's no Google when someone says, like, someone said the word gay, and they didn't just mean happy. And it wasn't, that knowledge, that experience just wasn't available.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it was also a time where, on the one hand, it was suppressed. You had Rock Hudson and Monty Clift earlier, who couldn't talk about their sexuality freely, but a director like James Whale, he was openly homosexual and was all right because he was behind the camera and nobody was affected. And it was also before the Hays Code.
Yeah.
So basically, what we have here is already on one cover, on one change, we have a whole lot of things to talk about, and then we have Catwoman. This is not her first appearance, but I thought this is an interesting picture because you see she commandeers the tiger, and she has the tiger between her legs. I mean, what image could be more sexual than this one here? And
her legs are naked.
Exactly, and it's very provocative.
We can see up that skirt.
Definitely, and it's a very, very nice image that conveys exactly what she brings to the table. And I mean, this is something Tom King is still riffing on. And this is basically her sexuality, her potent sexuality. She's shaking things up. She's splitting Batman and Robin apart with this interesting shaped tiger, and she is really in control here. And she puts them on a run, and they become cavemen in the story, which is also an interesting connotation here. Once the woman is around, men become cavemen. It's an interesting story.
Let me tell you, man, that was my 90s. Yeah, man. Who's on?
Yeah, we're going to the 90s. Yeah. Oh, but and then, here we go. Love it. You own it, do you?
Oh, I wish I owned this. Own it. The beginning of the Silver Age, to some.
Wow. And to put this into an historical context, we're talking here now 56, 57. Superheroes have become extremely unpopular. Superheroes are your Pepsi. They are your fathers, your older brothers kind of thing. Kids are into crime comics. They're into romance comics. This is the stuff they read. Horror comics are also still around, but barely because of the Comics Code, but kids are still reading. What they are reading is basically crime comics. Once the Comic Code comes along, it's more television. You can see Superman on television. Superman is still around, Batman is still around, Wonder Woman is still around, but Green Arrow is also still around, but more or less most of the comic characters, superheroes have died out. And here's Julius Schwartz, an editor who started in science fiction pulps. He says, let's bring the superheroes back, let's try this. And this is a tryout book, a showcase. So in the issue before that, you had firefighters, and then you had knights on the round table. So this is basically, let's find out what kids really want. And do they want the firefighters, or do they want the superheroes? And this is still a very iconic issue because you have Carmen Infantino, and if you only know, like I knew growing up in the 80s, I only knew Carmen Infantino in the 80s, thought his art style looked like shit. But if you go back to the 50s, especially with Joe Kubert inking here, damn, that man looks sweet. And he has a really very clean style, very reflective of the 1950s. This is the jet age, this is the space age in the making. You have a very dynamic hero. I mean, what's not to like? I mean, yes, it's changed. It's no longer the old Jay Garrick with the Mercury helmet. You have a very different kind of Flash, and he's also different. He's engaged. Well, it's not really clear if he's engaged, but he's more or less engaged to a woman who's working. She's not a stay-at-home housewife. She's a journalist. She's a reporter. She's also hip and trendy. She's a precursor to Jacqueline Kennedy. She looks very hip with her short hair, wearing gloves. Everything is very stylish. It's the modern age. It's very reflective of this. Sure, you could still keep the old superheroes around, but why? Nobody was buying them anymore. So you make change. Why not?
Well, when you think about it, once you've introduced the Silver Age Green Lantern, where his love interest is Carol Ferris, who owns a airline company. They make airplanes, and so she runs that company. She works. Hal Jordan works for her.
It's even more interesting. She is only allowed to run the company because her father wants to take a vacation.
Right.
So she always has the patriarchy looming over her, and she's always dire afraid that she makes a mistake, that her father will say, well, basically, I rather wanted a boy, and a boy would not have made this mistake. So you have a lot of potent material going on here right away, and she also understandably says, to her boyfriend, now that I run the company, we cannot be together, because that's kind of icky. And he is the guy who doesn't understand it. He is suddenly in the female position where he's the secretary, and he wants to stay with the boss. It's kind of interesting what's going on here. And let's not forget John Broome, who wrote most of those stories. He was smoking a joint every 5 minutes. So yes, that too.
Yeah, you do get creative when you smoke on that level, let me tell you. Weed.
Oh, trust me.
Maybe it was the only way to get through it.
Started drinking heavily now. So here we go. This, of course, everybody knows, but what people really seem to forget is how radical this issue was. I mean, this is really a groundbreaking. This is the Beatles putting out their first single. Sure, you had this type of music before. There were precursors to the Beatles, but what Kirby and Lee did here, Kirby did the heavy lifting. That's why I named him first. Is amazing. I mean, every element was there. The monster books, the science fiction couple, the Human Torch from the Golden Age, or the Torch as he was called, now Human Torch. But putting it together in this way, reassembling the pieces, was groundbreaking new at that time. And this is an amazing book. I mean, it starts with a cold open. Once you go through the first couple of pages, you don't know who these characters are. There's Mr. Fantastic. He can stretch his arm. He can fire a flare. I've never seen something like this before. He's in the civilian clothes. He doesn't have a secret identity. So Lee and Kirby did away with a lot of these trappings that were still holdovers from the Golden Age. They did their own thing here. Quite interesting.
What I love about this issue is it's such a combination of the types of comics that have come previously. So it's not just a superhero comic.
Right.
It is in a way like it's a modern version of the Challenges of the Unknown. It's like now here's the Challengers with superpowers. They're going to have costumes, but it's also the big monster stories that Marvel had been famous for the last few years. So with Kirby and Ditko doing all these great big monster stories, you've kept the big monster. You've got the big monsters all the way through this, but you've got one of the characters is a monster as well. Now they have superpowers. Now they're also adventurers, and you've got the science fiction element in that they fly off into space, and which is how they get their powers. It's got it all in there.
You could also argue that this is
you got the romance in there as well.
Yeah. But you could also argue this is also, in a way, even though they wouldn't have words for that at that time, in a way it's deconstructing superhero comics as Watchmen was or is in the future. Yeah. Because basically it's the horror of turning into a superhero. Now we have these powers, you don't know what to do with this. And to this day I say Josh Trank had the right idea, saying this is body horror. The execution was lacking, but the idea was sound. Yeah. I mean, when you go back to the first couple of pages, this is horror. These transformations.
And I also like the fact that in those early issues, Johnny Storm didn't live at the Baxter Building. He was always off with his friends. Like he was working on cars. He was making hot rods. You know, it's almost like American Graffiti with superheroes for that his story aspect. But he would be with his buddies, hanging out, and then he'd see the flaming F in the sky from the flare. And he'd have to go flame on and fly off to help. But
yeah, you would also have the heartache, the romance. He was a cool kid, but then he wasn't seeing his girlfriend for a while, and then she shut the door. She said, "I'm a new guy. Who are you?" And it's basically interesting. It's the kind of stuff 12, 13-year-old readers could identify with. And I loved this issue when I picked it up when I was 10 or something, and as a reprint in German. But I mean, this was fantastic, and this, especially Kirby's art, is very rough in the first couple of issues, and it's kind of primal. It's very primal.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice like that.
Woo!
And yeah, here we go. That starts one of my favorite Avengers. This starts my favorite Avengers team. I mean, everybody laughs about this when I say this, but it's so much more interesting to have these characters, not Thor, not Iron Man, not Giant Man, or whoever he was at that time, but low-level criminals trying to make good. And you could argue it's a little bit like what Bendis did with the New Avengers, that they are more street level, but they were also fighting Kang. And they were completely outmatched, and that made it interesting. And they were infighting the whole time. And you had Captain America at that time lusting after Scarlet Witch. So was Hawkeye. And they had conflict. Captain America was the old guy. He was perceived as the old guy. Hawkeye was the young up-and-comer. And so you had this rivalry going on there. I mean, this is cool stuff. I mean, and Don Heck was still doing good work. And, well, let's say there's a lot of help by Bollywood.
Yeah, it's almost in a way, this is the beginning of the kind of the Empire Strikes Back version of the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you know, if you think of the Kirby run as being A New Hope, it's the introduction of the Avengers, it's the concept, it's the idea that they all come together and help. Now it's like you come to this issue, and this is kind of, well, okay, the Avengers was a group of heroes. They've all got their own shit to deal with right now. So Cap's left, Captain America's left, but he's going to put together a team of, you know, like, who shall I pull together? And it's just, yeah, it's literally that, it's that team, almost Defenders like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In that they're not the A-level characters anymore. It's like, you know, Iron Man, the power of Iron Man, the power of Thor, you've lost them, no Hulk. So you've got the guy who can run very fast. You've got the girl that can cast spells. And you've got the guy with the bow and arrow. And he makes it work.
Yeah.
And then he pulls in, and it's nice when they bring back in Giant Man and the Wasp.
Oh, yeah, I love this time. I mean, it tells you a lot about leadership, how Captain America tries to pull the team together, tries to appease everybody. And you also see Hawkeye who's a jerk, and then basically he figures, oh, this is going nowhere. I need to sharpen up. I need to be a team player here. And it's a lot of character development going on here. It's quite fascinating.
Absolutely. We see
But
it now,
was,
though, in Hawkeye. He's no longer the jerk. I mean, now he's a full-fledged hero, you know, with a legacy.
Yeah, but you also see a tendency going this direction here as well. And this is also a lesson for kids. I mean, you can be the class clown, you can be the jerk, you can be the outsider, but if you want to be part of the family, you have to play by certain rules.
Yeah, it's that coming of age. Everyone's like, you know, you're figuring out your place in this world. And Captain America's that guy he's basically your teacher.
Right.
He's the guy who's pulling everyone in, sort of like, look, come on, get into shape.
Yeah, he's the only one Kenobi character. Yeah.
I mean, shit, I be mentored by Cap. Hell yeah, let's get it done. You know, shit, imagine me throwing a shield.
And it's also, you also see the beginnings of it's very tender here still, but the idea of Cap as a man out of time. You see it when he's frustrated by Hawkeye, when he's not able to interact with Scarlet Witch, who's a young woman, and she's also a foreigner. He's very smitten clearly, and he's not getting it. He's torn between duty and everything. I mean, this is quite interesting. I so would love to read the Otto Binder novel about this period. Everybody's telling me it's shit, but Otto Binder has written so much great stuff. I don't know how it can be shit, but I really would love this. If anybody has this, send me a tweet and I will buy it of you.
Yes, or even share a link if you know where we could get it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because, well, let's go to the next one here. And this is also changing things. You cannot see it because he's lying on his belly, the bum.
Oh.
But this is the beginning of the yellow oval. Nice. This is the new look Batman. This is Carmen Infantino Strikes Again. And if you do not know this period, this is the mod period. Batman becomes very hip all of a sudden. This is pre-68, this is 65, 64. Everything is very mod. This is the early days of the Beatles. This is Chelsea Boots. This is Bruce Wayne becoming a hip guy. And this is John Broome again, smoking that joint, and Carmen Infantino doing pencils. And everything is happening here in this book. This is before the Batman series. This is because they can no longer... 64, 65, this is. And this is when Julius Schwartz also takes over the Batman books from Jack Schiff, who got the boot because Batman was no longer selling it. Because before that, I could have also showed you that, you had Batman fighting aliens. Also some interesting stories there. The very famous Forbidden Dice at Dawn comes from this period. Very, very good story, actually. But for the most part, Batman was having these quirky adventures in outer space. and kids were no longer buying that. And it's Carmine Infantino and it's John Bloom and Julius Schwartz who returned Batman to quote unquote the dark roots, which basically, this is not really it, but it's going this direction. But also, I mean, if you say, wait a minute, all these kid characters that get killed off these days, blah, 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 Alfred is dead, Alfred dies in this run. Alfred is dead for 20 or 30 issues.
Yeah, I think you've got that. Like what Schiff was doing was, it was okay. Because of Comics Code was definitely very restrictive at this time. So, but what he was trying to do is he was just said like, okay, I'm going to give Batman the same adventures I've been giving Superman, and it's just going to be Batman instead of Superman. Literally, like using old plots almost. And getting away with sort of like, I'm going to tell exactly the same stories. And it just shows you can't do that.
Yeah, you couldn't use the gun, but you could use the ray gun. So here you go. And so you put him into space, and then you have a detective story in space. And also they had these. I'm talking about change. These characters, all these weird adventures and weird transformations. Superman had this red kryptonite. He got big. He got small. He got this. He got that. And Batman also was the Batman from other planets. He was purple. He was green. So they were trying a lot of things, and they were trying to show the kids, okay, these characters are flexible. These are all stories. It's almost Grant Morrison before Grant Morrison. It's very metafictional. These are stories. We're telling you stories. These characters can be anything. And it's kind of an approach we kind of have lost these days, where everybody is so serious about, oh, you can't touch this, you can't do this. Why not give it a try? They will always revert to their original roots because they are iconic characters, but you can play with these characters.
Yeah, well, I think that, you can't mess with continuity. And they didn't really. I don't think they cared about continuity at this point. Continuity was simply Bruce Wayne is Batman, Dick Grayson is Robin. You have Alfred, you've got Commissioner Gordon. There's not much else that's important. Like, yes, you've got his rogues gallery, and they just rotated around. Have we seen? Has there been a month in the last 5 years where there hasn't been a Joker story out during any month?
You know what's funny, guys? When I was buying Batman, a few years ago, several years ago, I was buying it. I was like, I only got one Joker story out of maybe 5 years worth of books. And then all of a sudden, the moment I stopped buying Batman, all of a sudden it's like Joker. I'm like, Jesus.
Oh, so it's your fault.
Yeah. No, we stopped buying. Yeah, it's kind of oversaturating the market, and this is now where we have the young baby boomers coming in. Danny O'Neill is one of his first issues for DC Comics, Jack Sparling on art, and we see immediately what's happening. Oh, woman, the Prof is dead. Yeah, their leader, he's not dead, and he got better. But Danny O'Neill did what he did. He took off the leader of the team and made the leader a woman, a rich woman, a very young and happening woman, and she is in charge, and she is going to be the new leader of the team. All of a sudden, this is Danny O'Neill coming in now. And if you go to the next slide, you can see her. What does she do? She changes. Yeah.
I have a question though. Is this kind of the first time, within DC or comics where we see a woman actually take the helm as leader of a squad?
I think so. At the top of my head, I would say yes. If you think that in the golden age, Wonder Woman was the secretary of the Justice Society, I mean, this is probably the first time. And worse, even when in the 70s, when after she had lost her power, she had to prove herself again to the Justice League when she got her powers back. I mean, how more misogynistic can you be about this? And here you have a woman coming in. She says, "Well, I'm as smart as your old guy, and I'm richer, and I'm calling the shots now." And the other guys say, "Well, basically that's what it is." And she gives them new costumes. She says, "Well, basically, I'm going to reinvent you. You are old and you're stale." This is Danny O'Neill coming in and saying, "Well, basically, let's kick the shit up. Let's do something with it."
This sounds like
go back. One slide back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know.
But was she the leader?
Yeah, she was the leader. She was immediately the leader of the team.
Because I know there was some of the later appearances.
No, that was a different woman.
Oh,
You don't mix up this June. June was the current character.
That's right.
She completely vanished. No, this is a new character.
No, there was one that appeared. There was one that appeared later on after this.
June, yeah, but was June coming back?
Oh, okay.
A lot of men still suffer from this, though. Where a woman comes into your life and says, "No, you gotta get rid of stuff. Change."
Yeah,
that has not changed.
Get rid of those. Get rid of those comics.
Right.
You know?
I need to. I have to look up. I have to look up what her name is. I think Cassandra or something. She has a completely different name. She's a completely brand new character. Danny O'Neill invented. That's the first time she shows up in those issues. No, June had fallen by the way. June had fallen by the wayside for the time being.
Rocky had to get rid of his action figures.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Red had to get rid of all his trading cards, his baseball cards.
Yeah, but if you go back to the dialogue boxes about, especially Rocky, I think either he has a girlfriend or he's lusting after this woman here. The dialogue Danny O'Neill gives him is vintage Stan Lee. This is the thing. It's very much the same. All she sees is the brood. All she sees is the monster, but I'm a sensitive guy. It's very Ben Grimm. I mean, Danny O'Neill took a lot from his short stint at Marvel. Let's put it that way. Before Stan kicked him out. I mean, that's also quite interesting. Danny O'Neill couldn't get along with Stan Lee.
And
even though, and talking about changes, I mean, I was really shocked and I double checked this. This is Mike Sekowsky writing and on art. And if you look at Mike Sekowsky drawing Wonder Woman from 67, 68, the guy looks like his own grandfather. He is 45 at that time. He has gray hair, losing his gray hair, thick glasses. He looks like he's 60, 65. And here's this young kid who's 16 years younger stealing his lunch, Danny O'Neill. And he says, well, it's basically, what you can do, I can do this too. Do you know who this character is? I mean, the speech bubble gives it away. This is Platinum. This is Tina. Mike Sekowsky had the brilliant idea to turn the metal men into humans. And there's this change coming from an old man. If you go to the next page, this is the metal man dying. And this is Mike Sekowsky. And the guys you see in the background, these are the new metal men. Human beings is the personality of the metal man. Isn't that brilliant? Isn't that a brilliant cover? I mean, the design is brilliant.
Yeah, the cover is. I thought this is a poster. This is a beautiful cover. I've never seen this cover before.
Oh, I thought they were just human looking now.
No, they were human. And the cover we saw before, you know who held that gun? That was Professor Magnus, killing them. So they could return to their robot bodies. And this is basically, he's returning them to their robot bodies. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is number 37. So at that point, okay. And then Magnus goes on in later issues, like putting you back.
I didn't put them in the right order because I wanted to have this is a little spoiler here. This is the issue after, or two issues after. This is the first issue where they're turned into human beings. So this goes the other way around, actually. Yeah, it's a great cover, and also the next cover is quite cool. And this is Mike Sekowsky. I mean, this is a very cool happening cover here. And you see Tina here with the belt. This is very, very 60s, very hip and happening. This is no longer a book about boring robots. I mean, no offense to Metal Man fans, but it's a guy in 45 who looks 60 who's trying to check things up. He's bringing change. He has a C-list title he's working on. He says, well, basically, I can change it. Nobody's stopping me. And why not? Make them. And imagine the shitstorm on Twitter today. Put out this book, and everybody said, "Oh no, you can't do this. How can they be human beings? That's not even possible." I'm waiting for the video podcast about that one. Yeah, basically, it's not possible. It doesn't work in real life. No, well, basically, they're robots. Whatever works, whatever you say it works. And this is 69. I mean, I'm sure Sekowsky was also smoking something.
Oh, why not? Yeah, definitely not weed if you're doing it. Level.
So I've always had a really strong soft spot for Mike Sekowsky. I loved his Wonder Woman, loved his Justice League, loved his work. He was working with Wally Wood on Tower Agents.
Oh man!
I mean, he's very underrated.
So if we had Twitter then, how this changed. I mean, that's probably would have hung the hate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fire Mike Sekowsky. again, Mike Sarkowski here, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is the Mike Sarkowski.
It is
and
Mike
this is not the cover, the famous cover where she has the jumpsuit on, but this is the issue afterwards, where she said, well, basically, I'm staying on Earth, losing all my powers. I'm now a normal human being, and I'm staying here, even though my boyfriend is dead, and I'm starting a new life. Why not? And imagine the shitstorm. I mean, there was a shitstorm. We know that because Gloria Steinem, if you don't know who Gloria Steinem is, Google her. She was one of the leading feminists. And she founded Ms. Magazine. And she said, well, basically, here's this guy stealing the power of the only strong female superhero I know. And that's not okay. That was not what Danny O'Neill planned to do, because he was also always doing this with his characters, also did it with Superman. But of course, the idea is, here's a man stealing the powers from a woman.
Wait, so
Danny
a man
O'Neill
can steal the
apologized.
power from a man and it's okay. Where's the manniness? Where's the mannism?
Yeah, but basically, I mean, Superman was one character and he was overpowered anyway, but Wonder Woman was the only superheroine of note at that time, and so he coming along, taking her powers, basically turning her also into a slut because she was sleeping around a lot at that time, because it was the 60s, late 60s. And Steve Trevor was dead, so here you go. And she no longer had her superpowers. And Mike Stokowski did a very nice job on the art.
So
very cool issues.
Do you think that she was very sexually active because of the loss of powers, and that was a way to cope with it? Do you think maybe that's how he was trying to write it?
I think it was also, I mean, I think it was mainly Danny O'Neill trying to be edgy. And there's still guys who said, basically, these were all short flings. She had every issue, she had a new guy. She was basically the female James Bond, if you want to. I mean, she was basically that.
Well, think about it another way. It was, how do you get over someone very quickly?
Mm-hmm.
You throw yourself into a lot of relationships very fast, one after the other, and like,
Wait, what's the term?
To rebound. But isn't it rebound? Wait. But it's also, I mean...
Let me say it again, right? To get over someone, you got to be under someone new.
Here you go. Now I catch you. But I mean, a modern writer like Tom King would also put a whiskey bottle into her hand. If you don't know what I'm talking about, pick up Catwoman, Batman issue 5. You see Catwoman drinking for 20 pages. Johnny Walker, My Poison too. So there's nothing wrong with that. But we're in the 60s, so she was probably smoking off panel.
And one of the awesomest changes from right here, a new introduction to explore the universe of Batman's family, if you will. Beautiful. Yeah, my boy, I helped him get it on eBay a couple of years ago. 13 Crusaders startup. He was looking for this book like Monster, and we said, "Yo, Al, I know you're good at eBay. Can you find me a deal on this somewhere, man?" And we found it. Yeah, beautiful.
But there's also a story to this, because Batwoman was first, and she kind of fell into obscurity before Danny O'Neill killed her off in the 70s. But the reason why we have a Batgirl is very simple, because William Dozier, the producer of the Batman TV series, was walking around DC's offices, and he said, we should bring a female on the show to get more ratings, maybe a Batgirl or something. And when he was out of the office, Julius Schwartz said to Carmen Infantino, quick, draw a Batgirl, we need to secure the rights. And so that's the reason why we have a Batgirl.
You know what, though?
It's the same reason why we have a She-Hulk, because there was also the rumor that they would add a female version of the Hulk to the TV series, and Stan said to John Buscema, come up, let's do a Hulk issue. And that's why they pumped out that first issue, which has nothing to do with the entire run.
Wow, gotcha. But is this not one of your favorite color schemes for Batgirl? I mean, this is my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
The purple is cool. This is fire to me.
Oh, it's still my favorite version of a costume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Even that little red handbag on the side.
Yeah, she
didn't have utility purse.
Yeah, she had that was a holdover from Batwoman, and she also had this kind of purse because she was a woman. But also she has the heels on her boots. She also has the heels on her boots, as you can tell. I mean, that's something a man drawing a woman here.
Do you think that this maybe brought even more female readers into the detective books, or were there maybe enough female readers at the time.
Actually might have actually, because she was also, I mean, she was a professional woman. She was working in a library, and she had her own life, and she was not quote unquote lusting after Batman. She wanted to do her own thing.
Yeah,
Yep.
I like the fact that she wasn't she wasn't lusting after Batman or Bruce Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they did kind of draw him a little overlooking, and she was so young. Even though we saw that animated feature that kind of showed them getting down, I was like, oh, that doesn't even look right to me.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
That was wrong. That was wrong.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
Yeah,
I get that. I get later on that you had the Batgirl Robin fling for a while.
That kind of made sense. She was a few years older, by the way. That also was interesting. They have an older woman with a younger guy. Kind of interesting.
But when you think about it, if you think to yourself, well, how old was Robin at the time? Maybe 16, and she might have been 19. So 3 years seemed like at that age seems a lot. But once Robin's in his 20s, that 3 years means nothing.
Yeah, but they maintained an interesting power dynamic, because she was at that time, she was a congresswoman, so she was in her early 20s, and he was a student at college. So it's kind of interesting how and he was her intern, interestingly enough. So it's kind of interesting, the power dynamic.
But this
is the same time at Marvel. Meanwhile, at Marvel, and this is Buscema and Stan co-opting Kirby's creation, the Silver Surfer, for Stan to write his favorite comic book. And you can still say, is he the devil? Is he a Christ figure? I mean, it's easy to say he's a Christ figure, but he's a little bit less Christ figure than more the fallen angel. And it's quite interesting. And Lee was really trying to get hip with the times. He was trying to write these stories that also had a lot to do with the youth movement, that had to do with pollution, with the arms race. Lee was really trying, and he had the black character saving the earth. And he was really trying his darnest to come up with stories that kind of fit the zeitgeist, but were not really popular, probably because they were too out there.
I think not so much that. I think the problem was that if anybody wants to talk about politics in comics, I think these are probably the worst examples. The stories, I mean, the artwork was great. Like John Buscema's art through this entire run was absolutely stellar, particularly the first few issues. Absolutely gorgeous. But I think
these were 40 pages issues. I mean,
oh yeah, but I think you see the thing was he took to trying to tell stories, so get across that hip message, man. And it's like there's only if you're making that the prime focus of the comic, there's only so many times you can do that to the point where it starts to lose weight. There was no yes, we knew the Silver Surfer was stuck on Earth, but what we didn't get was like, well, okay, well, what's he trying to do? Is he trying to get off? Is there a quest of some kind? There's, you want to have something. You want to have he would.
So the story, while he's there.
Yeah, well, it's what we miss is the story. What does the Silver Surfer do on his off days? I mean, what is he actually doing?
He busts himself.
That's kind. Yeah, he's surfing, catching the perfect wave.
Well, it would have been good if we'd actually seen him being proactive at some point. He could have literally, you could have done a couple of issues where he teamed up with the Submariner to help clean up the oceans. Like,
true,
right?
Do that. It's like that would have been fine. But I think that would have been hip and everything, but I think that would miss, by restricting the Silver Surfer to Earth. It should have been a miniseries, but they weren't doing miniseries then.
What's the miniseries?
And I really do think that the only person that could have really breathed the correct life into the Silver Surfer was Jack Kirby.
Oh, it's also interesting. I mean, this is the origin story. So Stan gave him an origin, and it's a very Stan Lee origin story where he loses his girlfriend, he makes the sacrifice to save the planet, becomes the Herald of Galactus, and this is the sort of Stan Lee kind of origin story. It would have been interesting to see Kirby's origin story, or to have no origin for the Silver Surfer, because this is basically doing the origin of Wolverine. All of a sudden, this character has an origin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I couldn't stand that. For me, that effed up the whole character Wolverine. For me, just the mystique and mystery was gone. He became boring. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's Bill James. That's Bill James' hand in this.
Yeah, but he wanted to tell the origin before 20th Century Fox did. Like he wanted, it's that same motive as Julie Schwartz saying, like, quick, let's get Batgirl, a Batgirl character in the comic. It's literally that level.
Doing it for the sake of doing it, not because you really care about the character. You just want to make sure
to secure the rights. I mean, if that's the motivation, then I can understand why he did it. But it's also
the nearest thing to when someone tackled anything like an origin issue of the Wolverine, I thought really worked, was when Barry Smith did here's how Wolverine got the adamantium skeleton, which just added more to the mystery. It's like, okay, we've solved the riddle of like how did he get the adamantium skeleton, but we still had no idea, and we still wanted even more to know, like, oh well, where's he come from? What's he? And just having that was great, and it never spoiled. I never thought to myself, oh, I'm going to stop reading Wolverine because I don't know what his origin is. Never once.
No. I mean, if you will, he's the character from the Clint Eastwood character. He's Jimbo from the Kurosawa movies. He's the man without a name. He walks into the village, makes sure the bad guys are all dead, and then he leaves. I mean, this is the Wolverine character.
See, that's the problem. If the man with no name, if like Fistful of Dollars was a Marvel comic, we'd have had his origin by now. Someone would have done its origin.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but you also don't need to.
Yes, there is. Damn it! Yes, there is.
Yeah,
I disagree.
Okay. Here you go. We can have it with some characters, and we don't need it for other characters. And I agree with you that we don't need it for Wolverine. We don't need it for Wolverine because Wolverine is a perfect character who works. You need an origin story for Scott Summers to understand where he's coming from. You don't need it with Wolverine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, especially when they made when the Starjammers got Cyclops' dad. Like how the hell this?
Corsair.
Yeah. I mean, you need that backstory. And this is part of a four-issue story arc, because we are in the late 60s, and people saying, well, basically DC is only doing the standalone issues. This is a four-issue story arc where Superman dies. I mean, and Superman gets replaced. And this is the late 60s. He dies. He comes back. He comes back at the end of the issue. But imagine this: the first 3 issues you see Superman dying. For 2 issues you see him dying, then you see his funeral in the late 60s. This is they did stuff like that in the 60s because they were shaking things up to making it interesting. Oh, the issue ends with Superman's funeral, and he shot into the sun. Basically, that saves him, but we don't know it at that point. Yeah. And so eventually he comes back. But for the time being, Earth is left with no Superman. And here's Supergirl saying, well, how can we replace the guy? I mean, she is the natural replacement, but we're not that far in men writing comic books. So here you go. So we need a man to replace Superman, not a woman. But basically, she could have also been Superwoman now, and she takes care of Earth. Yeah. But that's not what it is. But we are getting in that direction. We're seeing the change. We're seeing people trying new things.
There was a great Action Comics run around the same period. It was a 3-issue story where Superman lost his memory. Yeah. He actually thought he was president of the United States at one point. He thought he might be the president.
Or he was a wrestler. He was a wrestler. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of cool. I mean, they tried new things with the character. And that was beyond pink kryptonite, red kryptonite. That was doing something else. There was also a great 2-parter in World's Finest where Superman lost his superpowers. And he tried as a nomad-esque character with a new costume, and Batman was telling him, "Oh no, you're never going to make this because you never put the work in." And that's also quite interesting. It's an interesting message also.
Yeah.
Got it. So in this period, were they really trying to make a change and just startle people here with his death? Because
I think so. They were. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just, but don't forget, it's also about entertainment. I mean, you're trying to. I mean, this is already like that's Action Comics 366. So you've already had 366 issues of comics with Superman in it, and he's got a Superman title as well. So it's that thing of like, even in the 60s, they were going like, oh, how do we make this guy interesting? And it's not about it's not that Superman's not interesting, and it's not that you can't tell good stories with him. You get, when you're in that bubble, you're like, what do I do next?
Right. I mean, let's also not forget, this is the time when comic book sales are dropping. For the first time, they're really going. I mean, they had their peak in '52, but from the level they had eventually sucked down to in the '50s, and getting more readers coming in the '60s with Marvel. Now they were really dropping, and Marvel was eating their lunch. And this is the time when Donenfeld Jr., the son of the founder of the company, was fired. This is the time when Warner took over the company. When Warner is looking at Mad. They also bought Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine is selling 3 million copies a month, and they say, well, why can't you sell 3 million copies of a comic book? And they're trying things up. They're under economic pressure here. Big companies coming in. We hear today all about, MGM is bought by Amazon. Well, it happened in the '60s too. Creators had to find a way to deal with this.
We've always had change. We've always had change.
Yes, and this is the most dramatic change. This is Danny O'Neill coming on board, reducing Superman's powers, making Clark a hip guy, upward mobile. He becomes a news anchor. He is now not only wearing a blue suit, he's on television. He is a recognizable face. Well, that's Danny O'Neill. He's doing what John Byrne did 15 years later. He's doing it here, making
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's John Byrne just did it again.
With the Man of Steel,
and he said, well, basically, we don't need kryptonite. We only need to depower Superman. And we have a in-story reason why Superman is losing half of his powers. In the end, it's Wonder Woman who helps him defeat his new nemesis. And it's Wonder Woman without her powers, but with an Asian mentor, of course. But at the end of the day, we have Superman, and it was not popular. Danny O'Neill tried to do change. They did last 10 issues, and then they had a new writer coming in, changing it back to the status quo. That happens always in comics. You eventually go back to the status quo. You try a thing, doesn't work, go back to the old thing, do a new thing later. Why not? You see it all the time.
In comics, there's always an out. There's always an out to take it back to where, to hit this, okay, restart, go back. And that is the beauty of when you have characters that have such a recognizable cast and simplicity to them, that you can take them off in one direction and then but bring them back in, and like what worked, what didn't. And even if it's just, hey, we just did it for fun. It's just, we just did this story. It was out of the usual box, but don't worry, he's back where he was and better than ever. And
I mean, the one is on the cover for a reason. It's not the #1 issue, but it's Superman was still selling gangbusters comics, but still they tried something new because still they were losing readers. And still they said, well, how do we keep it fresh? How do we compete with Marvel? How do we do something else? And that's why competition is good.
Gotcha. Yeah,
next one?
I was trying to check to see if there was any letters columns that we could look at. I'm very curious about the possible hate that this received.
I should have, yeah.
But don't forget, now there's one thing you also have to understand is even letters columns, while sometimes they printed letters that were slightly negative, they were always, if there was 8 letters, 7 would usually be positive, and they would print 1 negative letter. And they were also put together by employees of the company, or the assistant editor. So when it came to so it's not like social media where it's unmonitored, unfiltered, it wasn't that. So, and you weren't going to get that. It would be, I mean, it's fascinating. It would be like God, it's like if you could change history and suddenly go back and give everyone social media back in the 50s, like what would people's reactions have been like if they felt they had a voice?
We would have been up to 5.
But also, there was this certain etiquette because the kids signed with their names, unless they made it up, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
And on social media, you can be anybody. You can voice your anger, you can voice your hate behind an avatar. Just say, well, basically everything sucks, and be nobody. Be a mask behind a video screen, and be a coward. And why not? But don't engage them.
But even now, though, you've see what they have with the companies is, yes, you could have a Twitter account that's and it's with not using a picture of yourself, a fake name, but if anyone reports you, Twitter knows what your actual email address is and knows what your actual name is, and so they can shut you down and stop you from coming in using that email address again.
Good.
And so there is that aspect to it.
I'm all for free speech and all, but you should also understand that these people exist. They are real creators who put their lifeblood in there. And I don't really fancy YouTubers sitting there and looking at an issue and say, well, this is all dreck. Well, basically, yeah, but somebody put their effort into this. And if you don't like it, you can say criticize it, but give it a little bit the same amount of time and diligence the artist and the writer put into this, because it's hard work to put this together.
Criticism should be absolutely on par, and not just criticize, but actually be constructive in your criticism. Why?
Yeah.
And a lot of people like that. They want to burn books and do shit. That's stupid, for real.
Well, don't forget. There was almost we've been through a particular cycle in comics where, back in the 50s and 60s, the comics were very editorially driven. It was always like, you'd pitch your stories and like, okay, well, here's what we want. We want something like this, or hey, here's a cover, write a story to that cover. Then what you ended up with in the 70s, 80s, and 90s to a certain extent was a bit more freedom as both Marvel and DC ramped up on the amount of titles they were doing. There was the ability to have some freedom on a title because quite frankly, they didn't have editors that could cover every single book. Then you get to the point where we are back now, where it's everything again. We're back to a mixture of editorially driven, and however, if you get to that sweet spot as a creator, you can start saying, well, actually, I don't want to do that. I want to do this now. And they want to keep those creators, so they kind of let them do not quite what they want, but they give them a hell of a lot of freedom.
And talking about some freedoms here, right? We get the introduction or reintroduction, is it? Explain.
This is not the introduction, but this is the conclusion to the Ra's al Ghul storyline. Ra's al Ghul was introduced in the background a couple of issues before Danny O'Neill, and a lot of people say, basically Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams were responsible for returning Batman to their dark roots. I would disagree with that, because Bob Haney and Jim Aparo did this a little bit earlier, and also they were the ones who kept Batman firmly in the detective genre. These stories in the Brave and Bold, they were very detective stories and very much of the hard-boiled early 70s paperback variety, versus Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams really made him into James Bond. And there was also a little bit of the Kung Fu craze. I know Dave has a picture of that also ties into the Kung Fu craze. This is the era of Bruce Lee, so he was getting trained by a martial artist from Asia. You see an Asian character in there. You get very much the James Bond, Bruce Lee vibe here, the globe-trotting Batman. Batman with the hairy chest, with the beautiful exotic woman at his side, with the world-domineering evil villain, with the plan. This is very much the Sean Connery meets very early Roger Moore James Bond here. And this is an interesting change for Batman. I mean, Batman becomes sexy all of a sudden, and he's attractive to women. I mean, Catwoman was always in the picture, but she kind of dropped off after the comic codes got established because she was too sexy for the comics code. And now you get Talia al Ghul, who's very much the femme fatale of the 1940s. She's Dragon Lady from the Milt Kenneth cartoon, and she's very much in power. And it's a very interesting dynamic coming here to Batman. This is not going back to the 1930s, as a lot of people always assume, because there's shadows and darkness. Yeah, right. But there's also something else here.
Now you got me curious. You got me curious again here, guys, because you mentioned the Comics Code Authority, Catwoman being too sexy, and I know that the Comics Code Authority was the self-policing of I guess, the creators that you've mentioned in the past, right? But then not any female there that had a voice to say, I don't see nothing wrong with that.
Well, basically, the Comics Code was also governed by women at a certain point in time, but they were older women, and they were working from a very strict set of guidelines established in the 50s. It was only in the late 70s, which is the period here, when the Comic Code got relaxed, because basically the creators got together. I mean, what a lot of people always forget is that the Comics Code was not some obscure government authority. The Comics Code was put into place by publishers. So the Comics Code worked for the comic book publishers, in effect. And they got together and said, this is kind of silly, we should overhaul these rules, give a little bit more freedom, because the kids are also different kids now. You can show werewolves and vampires again, which was strictly forbidden under the code. And there's still this funny story that, this is a funny story that once Marv Wolfman hit the scene, the Comics Code said, well, basically, you can't have a Wolfman in your comic book. And he said, well, that's the guy who writes the book, and he's a Wolfman, so here you go. And that's what's changing the Comic Code. It's a funny story. But at the end of the day, the Comic Code got softened, and at the end, you had to, remember, we had 68, 69, you had the issue with Speedy shooting Speed into his arm, well, hence the name. And so basically...
And you also had Spider-Man. You had the... Harry Osborn.
And before that, he had a black kid who was popping pills, and Spider-Man was saving him. And those 3 issues got published without the code. And Martin Goodman said, well, basically, don't use the fucking code and just go for it. This is another precursor to what we would see. This is Wonder Woman using the title. It sounds very familiar. This is a story that has been done over many times. There's a younger, hipper Amazon coming in, wilder, more the Wolverine type of character, and Diana loses to her in battle. And all of a sudden, she's no longer Wonder Woman. Lasted only a couple of issues, but they were trying something new. He had a new Wonder Woman in the late 70s. Wow. Here you go.
How long did that last? Only one issue?
No, two issues. 2 issues.
But this was, but let's be honest, this wasn't. Yeah, this wasn't a serious attempt to have a new Wonder Woman. This was, in many respects, I would put it at the same par as. I remember when in Strange Tales, when there was the Human Torch story where they reintroduced Captain America, but in this story, Captain America turned out to be a bad guy.
Right.
But it foreshadowed the Captain America returning in the Avengers. So it's always, you can do a 2-part story, you can have introduce a character on a sort of storyline, and then you go back to the regular run, but then you can check when the sales come in, like, we got a ton of letters on that character. They really like that character, so we've got to bring them back. Right. Or if there's no one, everyone says like, I thought for a second you were going to replace them. Oh, she was hot crap. Okay, well, we're not going to use her again.
Right. Which is exactly what they were doing here. They were trying to mold somebody else in a Wonder Woman. Let's see how it goes, and then. But they actually did it in the 90s with Artemis taking over. And this is a precursor to that, in a way.
And now with the future state, we get a Wonder Woman now, if you will. We have.
I mean, it's also a kick-ass cover by Rich Buckler here, by the way.
It is.
Who was also always gets the short end of the stick, because the Comics Journal brought up this rumor that he was tracing other artists, which I don't think it's true.
No,
man, artist. Boring. That's bullshit. I saw him, and he was a very skilled man. Upset over certain things, but very skilled. I saw him just a few months past.
I think if you look at Rich Buckler, one of the things he was able to do was he could synthesize other artists' styles into his work, because that was what was requested from editorial. So if you look at, like, there's definitely a Neil Adams look to his Deathlock stories. But then,
also to his Avengers, because Neil Adams was on the book before him.
Exactly, and Barry Smith. But then you've got him doing the Fantastic Four with a very, very Kirby style to it. And he was just like, okay, you want Kirby? I'll do you Kirby. But you look at it and it's like, and in the same way, like I'd look at someone like Steve Rude. Steve Rude, like if you want something that's very Toth-like or Jack Kirby-like, Steve Rude is easily the best guy for the job. And he can synthesize both of them. I mean, he's one of the few people who can give you Kirby and Toth in one image. But yeah, and that's all Rich Buckler was doing. But and again, there might have been the odd pose now and again. He's trying to get it right, and he goes like, oh, that yes, so and so got that right. I'm just going to sort of like steal that particular pose, but I'm going to draw it as myself. And I think every artist has done that. I honestly think there's not. I don't think there's a single artist who's never done that.
I've seen crazy page swipes where you see something like Kirby had done. I saw a Fantastic Four cover. Kirby had done something, and then you see it on a Doctor Strange cover, maybe 15, 7 years later. It's the exact same effing image, just a couple of changes in the background. It's like, okay, that's not an homage, that's a rip.
Dan Atkins, great artist, great inker, also did this a lot for his run on Doctor Strange. He plundered a lot of EC comics for that one. There's a cover on one of the later EC books with doctors, and it's exactly the same image. And he really traced a lot there, but still a good artist.
But I think he got a lot of that. He was influenced very much by Wally Wood, I mean, it's not about tracing. It's just about like, hey, instead of me agonizing over a pose, so-and-so's drawn it already. That's exactly what I want. I'm going to rough out that pose, but I'm going to draw it as me. So you wouldn't recognize it. You don't say it, hey, that's a John Buscema pose. No, because Dan Adkins has made it him. Sorry, Wally Wood's made it him. But he'd just go, he'd just use it like reference, like some artists would look at a photograph. He just looks at another artist and goes, oh, that's perfect. That's great. Exactly what I want.
Yeah. And I mean, if you remember the Wonder Woman cover and you think about the Silver Surfer, I mean, we're coming into the early 80s now, changes in the air. You have another generation of artists coming in. And we have John Byrne, who is one of the major change artists of this time. And he's bringing the change. And he's making the Herald of Galactus a woman now. And she volunteers again to be that, not because he's threatening Earth. He's also threatening Earth, but she says, well, basically, this is what I want to do. I have a purpose in my life now. It's Johnny Storm's girlfriend. She's Nova. Before that, she has no name, but she has superpowers. And now she is the new Herald of Galactus, a woman. Why the F not?
Well, she wants to do... I love that basically her motive is, it's not so much, I don't have a purpose in my life. It's just like, oh my God, the ability to fly among the stars, to be able to instantaneously travel across the galaxy. Fuck yeah, who wouldn't want to be able to do that?
Yeah, and it's interesting that she's not helping. That she's not like, oh, I have a boyfriend here on Earth, so I cry a million tears like Nora did with his beloved. No, she's like, well, see you later. I'm going to the stars, and that's John Byrne for you. Why not?
Yeah.
That's hysterical. Later, homie, I don't need you. I'm gonna be in the stars, kid. That's awesome.
But it's great. It's like, look, she and Johnny clearly have a relationship. They really care about each other. But God, it's like, here's something that is like, this isn't about like, she doesn't know how much longer that she and Johnny have got together. But something like this, like, oh my God, it's just like, there's, I hate to say this, Johnny, but like, you're a nice kid and all that, but
and she also became a central character in his story he did for Epic Comics. The character story he did for Epic Comics, and she's an interesting character. And why they have not? I mean, this is change, and cue the cry boys to say, oh, the Silver Surfer can't be a woman. Well, basically, now here's a woman. It's not the Silver Surfer.
She's not.
Yeah, it's not
right. We've had several heralds of Galactus.
Terex, for example.
Yeah. Fire Lord.
Was it Fire?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Fire Lord. True. Yeah. So why not a woman? Let's go for this. And while we are on it, why not replace the Thing with a woman? This is also what John Byrne did. When we go to the next one, we have She-Hulk, now a woman. She-Hulk, now a woman. Wonderful. No, we have the Thing being replaced by a woman, I wanted to say. And here we go. We have She-Hulk. This is the first official appearance in the Fantastic Four of She-Hulk. And you see Sue Storm, who hasn't got the news yet because they were off on a faraway planet, because this was happening in the during the Secret Wars, the original Secret Wars.
Yep.
And you still hadn't reached that point in the Secret Wars story, so you didn't know what was happening.
Exactly, because I was like, okay, she became Fantastic Four. Like, how? I mean, as you could say, if you didn't.
But that was actually one of the few interesting things about Secret Wars was it was literally everyone disappears, and then the following month they're all back, but you don't know why. They never told you what happened. You had to read Secret Wars. You still had to read Secret Wars to find out what happened.
The same was what the same what we will see was in a minute was the black costume on Spider-Man. Now he had a black costume, alien costume, and we didn't know why.
And don't forget, I mean, as you know, as we're talking about change, Secret Wars was something that we hadn't seen before.
Of issues.
Well, the crossover, the fact that almost like all of Marvel's major characters crossed over there, and it made massive changes in all of those comics.
And I think also what I mean, as I said, I changed my stance on Jim Shooter a little bit, and what he did in Secret Wars, what is often overlooked, is what he already did in Legion of Superheroes when he was writing Legion of Superheroes as a teenager. He blurred the line between good and bad, because in Secret Wars, some of the bad guys, in order to survive, they became the good guys. They helped the others. And then they were in on a bigger purpose, and this is quite interesting for the time. Also, we see it's not what you would call an anti-hero. It's the changing sides.
Yeah, and this is also around the same time as the Infinite Crisis stuff, right? Because DC said, "Oh,
we're coming to that."
Not Infinite Crisis.
I mean, I'm not Infinite. Sorry.
Yeah. But that was afterwards.
Yeah, we're coming to that in a hot minute. But this is around the. We're getting there. This is now. I remember picking this up and what's going on here, and I remember reading a column about this and it said, well, basically in '68 the Beatles split up, or almost at '69, and that was the biggest band, and Spider-Man splitting with his original costume. That is a shame, and you can't do this. So there were people pushing back against this, and even the creators were unsure if this would last. I mean, it didn't last ultimately, but it lasted longer than they had anticipated, because I remember some creators saying, well, basically we do it for a couple of issues and then we're done with it. No, they kept it around for a surprisingly long time.
Well, remember, there was a lot of people who they still, like, this was still their Spider-Man. Like they, this, when you ask them, like, which is your favorite? Oh, the black costume. And even when he'd been separated from the Venom, the symbiote, he still wore a black costume for a while.
And the reason that is, from at least in my mind, for a lot of that generation, because remember, the Secret Wars tied into that toy line. So a lot of toys, they got the mini comic. Oh my God, what's this? And they got deeper into it, and this is their first look at a Spider-Man. Like, oh shit, a black suit. There's no red and blue here. What's going on? Who cares? He looks dope. I mean, to be honest, it's actually one of my first comics right here. You know, after I got my first card, this is actually one.
And I mean, just talking about people hating change, this issue sold gangbusters. This issue was sold out in every store.
Yes. And to this day, it still commands a nice piece of change.
I should have kept mine. I mean, this is also a reason why a lot of people say Marvel was cooking it in the 80s. They were really red hot. And I mean, if you want to talk about change, I mean, we can go to. We talked about him in. Go back and check for the podcast we had where we talked about Marvel Men. I mean, it is Marvel Men, not Miracle Men, and we see change coming to characters. Alan Moore. This is still the early 80s. So I can do the Nick Underhill stories like from the 50s. Or I do something completely different with the character. I can completely redo the character. And this is what Alan Moore does and did. He was basically Daniel O'Neill, a little bit more sophisticated in his storytelling with the change he brought to characters. He had a little bit more of a plan to this. And he completely redid the character.
Yeah. But this was like a total... this is the first time I think we'd ever seen a total redo of a character. Like everything you knew before was fake type of character. But I would say this is almost the first adult superhero comic.
Oh, very much so.
Agreed.
And remember, I mean, talking about change and talking about the pushback, remember issue 9, the birth issue.
Yeah.
Was it Wizard? It was not Wizard. Was it Diamond did refuse to carry the issue?
Yes,
They
I have that somewhere in my box. That issue.
yeah, but obviously it did get distributed.
Yeah, because Diamond was not the only game in town back then, and but there was a lot of pushback on that issue. Oh, you cannot show childbirths. I mean, you can. They had no problem with the issue 15, where Billy destroys London. Young nasty man destroys London. They had no problem with that issue, but the birth issue. No,
but don't forget, there's always been like when it comes to violence and horror, there's always been a much greater acceptance of that than anything that's thought of as sex. So birth, like, you don't think of it as like it's birth. It's a natural thing. It's not like we're having a hot and horny 20 pages of Marvel Man having hot sex. It's not. It's Liz giving birth, and it's just like that's what it is. It's a birth scene.
I mean, it is scary. I've seen it in person, and I'm like,
oh yeah, me too.
It terrified me. Oh my god.
Yeah, but it's also what Dave said. I mean, it's always anything that has to do with sex is always problematic, as the kids would say today. And if you talk about change, you cannot talk about Frank Miller. That's why I included this. I mean, an old Batman. There is change, and if you compare it to today, I mean, I think this is also interesting. I think it's the third time I mentioned Tom King. Tom King, hello out there. But it's interesting what Miller does. He has Batman, the old guy, coming back to say, well, basically the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and I'm going to turn it around. It's my responsibility. Versus in Tom King's old Batman dies of cancer. Pick and choose. Both are one end of the spectrum. You can do both stories. There's nothing wrong with it. But do these stories. Why not? Why is Batman always a young guy? He can be an old guy.
Well, I saw to me, The Dark Knight was Frank Miller saying, like, okay, Batman getting to a point in his life where it's no longer just a fist in the face to sort of stop someone now. It's what he puts Batman up against is kind of almost like the Zack Snyder effect, which is he put him in a scenario where, admittedly, he put him in like, okay, I'm getting old. I've got to literally wear a suit now to give me the strength because I've got the bulk. I've still got my bulk. I still work out, but I just don't have what I had when I was younger. And I need a tank now, a proper tank. And yeah, it's like, he kills Joker.
And it's also putting Batman against a right-wing government. It's clear, and Superman is the Boy Scout of a right-wing government. This is really Batman is now the liberal underdog. It was before that he was the status quo. Now he's fighting the new status quo, and it's sort of the old establishment hitting back against the new establishment. And it's a very interesting, very complex story that. But I don't think
I don't see Batman as a progressive at all, like in that sort of lefty in that respect at all. It was still he just saw Superman as the big Boy Scout who was just kept me in his way.
Yeah, he's basically the old establishment pushing up the sleeves and saying, well, basically, you guys don't cut it. We're coming in now, and we are going to save the day. I mean, this is sort of the pure American spirit in a way, and he is very much an agent of the establishment. He comes across as a left-leaning guy because that is what he's doing. He's fighting this right-wing clandestine government, which is clearly the Reagan government. But I mean, it's also interesting what Miller said. I mean, it ties into what I said about Mike Sekowsky. He said, well, basically, he turned 30 and he couldn't accept that Batman was younger than he was, in no way. And so Batman needed to be older than he was. It's also a creator getting older and making the characters older. They did the same as Peter Parker. Peter Parker became older when the creators became older.
Yeah.
And that was a great ride with Spider-Man though, because you saw growth, you know, a high school kid, get a job, go to college, eventually get married, and then all that shit off again, and let's reboot back to fucking high school, which got, oh man.
Yeah, but
That's
don't
so
forget
much-
that's part of what I want to talk about as we get on a little bit further, because it is that aspect of, you know, are you going to allow change? Like there's some, when we talk about change, like right now, look, Watchmen, just not even just the subject matter, the format of Watchmen, the way the paper it was printed on, the quality of the printing, no ads, you know, it was special. It meant comics were changing, and it was and there was a real time here where comics could have actually made a much more significant leap, but it's what you have when you have a company that, whether it's hands are held by the corporation, or you just don't have the people that have a foresight, who are scared. It's like, basically, it's like you're on that ledge. You like you know what I've always liked in the Spider-Man films, when whenever they've touched on his origin again, you've always got that sequence where he runs across the rooftops and he's going to leap from one building to another, and it's that sort of like, and he stops and he goes back again, because he's not like, he knows, like, he can do some crazy shit, he can do some stuff, but can he make that leap? And he finally does, and he does it. And it's that sort of like knowing that he's got faith in his abilities and that faith to make that leap. That wasn't present in anybody in the comics industry. There was no one that was going to make, okay, we need to change what we do and how we do it. And there's plenty of examples. Like it was very evident of like the best editions of Watchmen that were done by the French. The French did Watchmen as a 6-volume set, beautiful hardback, oversized books, new covers by Dave Gibbons, looked amazing. They did the same. They did the best edition of V for Vendetta as well, and in that same format. Fantastic, beautiful. That's how it should have been done in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, that's again, when we talk about comics, we one time we should also look at the market outside America, because in France comics are a respected art form, and this is Gibbons and Moore were getting there. I mean, if you look at the trade dress, if you look at the formality of how much this is formatted. This is the cover is always the first panel. There's a unity to everything. There's a certain rhythm to everything. And this is really, comics could have made a jump at that point. Instead, they took the wrong lessons from Watchmen. So, it's dark and gritty. Let's do dark and gritty comic books now.
What you finally had with Watchmen, there you go. What you finally had with Watchmen, Dark Knight, V for Vendetta, later Hellboy, was here's the types of strips that actually resonated. They weren't the typical American comics in style or format or
even the coloring was different. Even the coloring was different. They didn't use the primary color. They didn't use the primary colors.
So when you put those in nice hardback editions, they were very acceptable and digestible for a French, Spanish, Italian markets.
Oh yeah,
and they did very well. The problem came when the Marvel and DC, if you were a foreign publisher and you wanted the next project by Alan Moore or the next project by Frank Miller, you had to promise to print and translate a bunch of other titles that you didn't really want to publish, but you had to. And what that did was that eroded. So those publishers, they did it because they really wanted to publish, Dark Knight 2 or whatever. They really wanted to do it, but the problem was everything. The material they had to publish actually weakened their own books within their own territory.
Ah, gotcha.
And doing that, ultimately, it's an example of the change we were facing, the world was facing in comics and publishing there is not only was like the United States was unwilling to change in how it did its publishing. It knew that it was faltering. It knew that its sales were slipping. But rather than take the change, they forced their material on a larger market so that they could take money from that market. And in doing so, damaged the other market. Literally every market that Marvel and DC went into, they damaged it. They hurt it.
So they're like a virus.
Yes, definitely.
They were a virus, yeah.
Yes.
And I do want to note this because you were saying, you know, a comic that was finally ad-free, right? But it came at a cost. Looking up at a cover price from October 1986, the average cover price was 75 cents. If you wanted this ad-free comic book, you were paying double the price, $1.50.
Yeah,
but let's not forget that was also the time when they had the prestige format at DC Comics.
Right. But you also, but to be fair, Watchmen was literally twice the content.
Yeah,
right? It was no ads. It started off with there was like text backups and things like that, background information. Eventually, one of the reasons that Watchmen kept being delayed was there's a lot of text in the first few issues, and then because they didn't realize at that time, the decision to take all the ads out came later. So Alan had to basically write some text pieces to go in the back. Then he had to, with the issues that he was then writing the scripts for, those had to be expanded out to longer page counts. And then Dave Gibbons, obviously, he had to draw more, which is why Watchmen end up getting later and later, and the 12 issues did not run monthly. We know that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And talking.
Yeah.
Actually,
L already mentioned it. This is the change coming here now, like never before in DC. I mean, this is completely changing everything. This is massive. And this is DC taking a gamble. They're saying we have a 40-year history at this point. Let's reboot everything. Let's try from scratch. Because nobody is going into comics willing to seek out 40 years of comic books.
Yeah.
And this is still one of George Perez's best work. I mean, the detail on these issues is crazy. I mean, just give it up to the man if he's listening. Fantastic artist.
George Perez was someone who literally, I can imagine Marv Wolfman's scripts for this would have basically caused terror in just about every artist at the time, except for George Perez.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at that cover.
Yeah. Draw all the different costumes and draw them correctly in different time periods, no less.
All of those characters and more appeared in that first issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And sometimes 20 characters in one panel.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean,
particularly later on.
I got it here with the Alex Ross variant cover.
Right.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Love this.
It feels very, very at home in the spirit.
I mean, it was. I remember reading it at the time, and artwork was beautiful. I mean, like the story itself was kind of, it was okay, but it was, Marv Wolfman always delivered. And I think that it was one of those things where when it ended, it was like, wow, that was a run. And but just like everyone else, there was always those characters that you liked that suddenly you realized you weren't going to see another story from them. Yeah. They winked out of existence, like boom, they're gone.
A lot of them, but it also brought in some universe, because now they also, finally brought in some Charlton characters like the Blue Beetle into regular universe after the fact. Part of the
definitely. But because they could all be in one universe. I mean, the concept is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, this was also the time when they decided, okay, there was a Justice Society of America during World War II. Yeah. And I think this was the bits where I kind of the logic that I based my fandom on at that time, up until that point, was, there was Earth 2, and I knew that was their way of explaining away the old stories from, the 1940s. But logically, I always looked at DC Universe as this: when it comes down to its prime, that it was the influence that Superman was the character that influenced basically the entire DC Universe. Everything, he inspired other people to come out to don a costume, to fight, to help.
He was the pillar.
He was, and it was, and you kind of saw of him as the first. When you take that away, when Superman is no longer the first, he was just one of many. He's probably the biggest and strongest or whatever, but he's no longer. He wasn't that agent of change that you imagined him as being. So in a way, to me, that actually diluted him. It made him a lesser character. His importance lessened.
Same as Wonder Woman to a certain degree, because she was no longer in the 1940s. She was no longer coming to America because of the war.
But again, Wonder Woman's one of those characters where, why didn't you? It could have been the same character. It's like, if she's immortal, then she could have, she could have disappeared. It's like been like Captain America. At some point, Wonder Woman disappears, and then she comes back. Where's she been? We find out she's been on Themyscira for all that period, but who knows? You could have had some interest. You could have told an interesting story with that.
Could have done that,
yeah.
And this cover has been emulated and emulated and emulated.
which itself is a rip-off of the Pieta, because this is Pieta, of course. And this is very much based on Christ, and but basically this is bringing a universe to an end. It says 50 on the cover, 50 years of DC, or basically 50 years, and then it's over. I mean, that's quite interesting. It's really daring.
But again, it's you see, when you're going to do something, like, okay, like, it's daring, you make it different. But again, it reminds me of Rebirth, in that you didn't quite think it through. You've killed off Supergirl, but what do? You bring back this proto thing that thinks it's Supergirl.
Totally ridiculous.
Then you try sandwiching and pushing in, Power Girl. Power Girl is now Supergirl. You brought that in, and then that didn't work out. And eventually, I mean,
bring back all of the continuity from 20, 30 years ago, which eventually what they did. They brought everything back.
Yeah. And we ended up with the multiverse again. But what they did this time was, we're going back to the multiverse, but now we're going to actually, it's a 52 universes, and here's what they all are.
Yeah. But now it's even gone beyond that. It's no longer the 52, because the source wall is broken. So now we see that there's even more outside and beyond the source wall.
Oh, Jesus.
You guys didn't know that? Yeah, that's what's going on.
No, wow.
There's a reason I don't read DC Comics anymore.
So let me ask you though, since you guys were collecting at this time, again, for me, this is my early day.
I was collecting. I had those issues, and for me, it was like this was really brilliant, because I really enjoyed those. I was 18 at that time, 18, 19. That was really early college days, and you really picked those up because, that's it. It's new and fresh.
It was, and I thought, wow, this is it's an interesting story. However, I think at the back of my head, I just was like, wow, this is an interesting story. But like Secret Wars, I just thought, well, at some point, this is all going to we'll be back where we were. She-Hulk will no longer be part of the Fantastic Four, and the Thing will be back at some point.
I think there's also a great opportunity missed here, because Byrne was so eager on inventing and reinventing things that he missed out on really using the interesting villains and redoing the villains in the first couple of issues. And because he was inventing new villains, which is okay, absolutely fine. But he had all these characters to pick from, and he could have brought back the Parasite, make him an interesting character, do him in the very much in the 80s vein. Instead, he went very quickly to the Dick Kirby toy box doing Doomsday and Darkseid, much too early. Yeah. And from the story perspective, it was underwhelming. The idea, the principle, the basic idea to start fresh was great. But I think Byrne very quickly dropped the ball, in my understanding, even back then when I read those issues. And I've reread them since, and my opinion hasn't changed. Let's not go to the Bada porn story.
Oh, yeah.
And I also say that this was also a big change here, especially when it came to this particular issue, because it's also introduced the variant cover to collectors.
Oh yes.
When you had so there was another big change, and wow, what a big change! Because if you look nowadays, I mean, every comic book has 10 covers or more.
Yes.
Same.
Yeah, Man of Steel 2 cover. Man of Steel 2 cover. I think this only had one cover. I'm not sure, but Man of Steel 2 covers.
It was a variant. I'm sorry. Yeah, but again, they came out around the same time anyway. You know that mini.
Yeah,
and then,
yeah.
You know,
the mini was there to catch you up to this new status quo.
Yes, the story of why he changed and how he changed and what's so different about him. I mean, again, his powers is a little bit later on in life. You know, star athlete and all that. Kind of see that.
No Superboy, which was wiping out the Legion of Superheroes out of existence.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. It was cool. It was different. I remember my homie, a homie of mine, actually having the issue in his hand. Oh, look what I got! You know, I was like, "What's this?" Oh, they're changing Superman. I'm like, okay.
It was also interesting. It's also interesting. You also saw the ramifications of the Dark Knight in those issues, because they stayed with the Miller course that Superman and Batman were not friends.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, and another.
And this is to this day. I mean, to this day, when we talk about change, a lot of people, I always forget this, but a lot of people say this is their Flash, Wally West. Yeah. And for me, it's always Barry Allen, because that's the Flash I grew up with. But if you grew up with this Flash, of course, this is your Flash.
Oh yeah. Well, just as it was, if you think about it on a much bigger scale, because don't forget the reach of animation and TV is much larger than comics. So when I remember back when the Green Lantern movie, people were expecting like, oh, is it going to be John Stewart?
Yeah, definitely.
Because that was their Green Lantern. They'd watched the animation. They hadn't read the comics. They just watched the animation, and it was like, well, why isn't he Green Lantern? Who's Hal Jordan? Yeah. It's very quick.
And it's still the same. They go with this is so amazing. I mean, HBO Max is developing a Green Lantern series at the moment. They're going with Guy Gardner. Nothing wrong with Guy Gardner, and they're bringing Aaron Scott as a homosexual now in the 40s, which is an interesting angle. They can do that, but why not go with John Stewart? Why Guy Gardner?
Yeah, John Stewart, exactly. I mean, that's what people want. Nobody's been asking for Guy, so HBO, take the wax out of your ears and listen to the fan base a little bit of what we really want. Nobody cares about. I mean, no hate here. You know what I mean? Guy's cool, but John is what like Dave was saying. A whole generation grew up with John. I love Barry Allen. When I saw this Wally West take over, and I've gotten into arguments over this sometimes. So stupid.
And what a lot of people forget, he was a very fleshed out character on the animated series, because he was written by an African-American writer. I mean, he had an eye on that, and he was writing him very, very, in a very good way.
And I also want to mention here that this is actually a positive change, because obviously Barry died on Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? I mean, this was Kid Flash. He gets the mantle. I mean, something so logical. He wasn't handed the mantle, he was part of the life. He was a sidekick, you know what I mean? He knew him. And now he done. See, a logical choice.
This is actually a lot. What I really liked about this new Earth, this new concept, was that there was a legacy. That kids followed their parents. They messed up. They had to learn the game. This idea of legacy characters. This was something new in DC at that time.
And it's cool here, as you see here on the corner, from the pages of Legends, because obviously Legends also, that miniseries reintroduced Suicide Squad, brought in Amanda Waller, and by the end of that series, we had a whole new Justice League.
Yeah.
Go to the next slide, and there we have the new Justice League.
Beautiful, look at that.
Yeah.
And what a team. Me, who I mentioned before, look, you get a Charleston character in it right here, right
Yeah.
now. You know, here we bring you Shazam out full fold, you know, not as a joke character, but not here.
Well, it was only, well, the good thing about this book was it was one of the few times where Shazam, Captain Marvel, had actually been utilized well, because they kept him in character, and which worked perfectly when you put him against Guy Gardner. So if you said to me, we're doing a Guy Gardner TV show, but secretly it's a backdoor to us doing the Giffen and Mateus Justice League, I'd be like, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go for it. If that's what you're doing, go for it.
Yeah. And you see, I mean, you can complain about the humor in Marvel movies, but this was a comic book that completely stood its ground against the dark and gritty trend that was coming more and more. This was a humorous book. It still was interesting.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I think it was a victim of its own success because, and this is one of the obvious the big problems with, change is anything that's decent, we have to have more of it. We've got to duplicate it.
Yeah.
If Giffen and Mateus had if they'd been allowed to just stick with Justice League, no doing Justice League Europe, no Justice League International, just kept to this one book, keep it strong, they'd probably be still doing that book today. But they oversaturated it, they stretched it, and it was just, again, it's just like it spoils you. This is unfortunately the problem. This is the change that I think, this is why American comics won't ever be able to make the change it needs to make, because it's always driven by profit. I mean, not that any other publisher isn't, but it's literally like, Batman's popular. Let's really, really squeeze more blood out of Batman. Got to have more. And that's the problem. Whereas if, I still think, I've said it before, I'm boring as old fart, but if you take that, look at what, Harry Potter today is still, they're still having the local department store, they're still having exclusive, special exclusive product of Harry Potter. Or now they're still being pushed. The books are still selling. Kids are still finding the films for the same, for the first time, and they're binge watching them. People are going back to watching them 5th, 6th, and 7th times. If you do something good, keep it solid, people will keep going back and back and back. So the corporation can make a gangbusters. They will make a shit ton of money. If comics were published the same way, basically the same way as the European model, we don't have to have 4 Spider-Man comics a month or 4 Batman titles a month. How about one really good graphic novel every 3 months?
Or you look at music. I mean, you always see that artists will always want to stretch themselves. The Beatles could have stayed with the same sound for the 10th album, and instead they went to the White Album. They tried new things, and this is you can say, I hate it. But this is progress. This is development. The same as U2. You can name any band. Well,
just think, the Beatles could have said, you know what, we've got some ideas. Hey, do you know what I'm going to do? John Lennon's, I'm going to do my album on the side. I'm still going to do my stuff. Paul McCartney wants to do his stuff on the side. But we're going to stay as the Beatles because we're making a lot of money. So let's keep making lots of money.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the mentality then, which I think that we're so used to that now, where everyone just keeps going as hey, I'm just going to keep making as much money. I'm going to milk whatever I do for as long as I possibly can until I can't do it anymore.
And I like that way that Beatles thing, because you know who actually did it right? The Wu-Tang Clan. They formed a group, and each one of them was able to spin off on their own. However, they would still get together to do the group stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Wu. That's what it was. What a great way to do it. Hey, guys, all shine on your own, but we could also shine together. You know what I mean? And everybody grows in artistry. Just get back together every couple of years and do something awesome.
They were the musical Justice League.
Yeah, yeah. Or think about Prince. None of his albums sounds the same. He was always stretching himself. He was always doing new things, always pushing the envelope, and that's what kept him creatively going. Versus Michael Jackson. Well, that's Michael Jackson.
But you see, it's that thing of as fans, sometimes the audience and the corporation itself, like say, you look at Alan Moore. Oh, it's like, we never want Alan Moore to stop writing Swamp Thing. Or, hey, why couldn't, Watchmen was great. Why aren't you writing 10 more sequels to that? Why can't we have a Watchmen ongoing comic by Alan Moore? It's like, if this is someone who well, no, I had a story to tell and I told it.
And that's that.
I mean, if I want to recommend another podcast that it's you need to check out, if you're into music and the history of music and crime and darker stuff, check out Disgraceland on Amazon. It's also on YouTube by what's his name, Jake Brannon. Fantastic podcast. I was just listening to the Prince episode yesterday, and Prince pulled the Black Album because he didn't like it. He listened to it on a club and he got the wrong reaction, and he phoned up Warner and said, "Pull it. I don't want it sold. It's crap." No. And they said, "Oh, it's already on the truck." They said, "Oh, turn the trucks back." And they did it for Prince because they valued the artist more than the product. They said, "Okay, no problem. Prince is more important than one record." And he probably already has 10 records in his basement anyway. So pull the trucks back because we value the relationship we have with Prince. And this is the way you do it.
And not anymore, man. Business ain't like that. They value the property over the creator more each and every day. I saw a post by Jimmy P. It's like, the big two are wondering why they're losing so many creators. Hey, they're enticed by independent companies. They're giving them more piece of the pie for their creative effort.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
learn
absolutely.
big.
Let's see how Discovery will do this with Warner. I mean, have AT&T screwed the pooch? I mean, did they piss off their talent? Let's see if Discovery bring it all back.
I hope so. Well, let's see. Let's see if they discover the right way.
But I think this is a thing that people hold on to, and people should know by now. These characters are published by a corporation. These characters mean absolutely nothing to these people at the corporations. It's nothing. They are revenue generators, pure and simple. So if they can tell 50 Batman stories a month, they will do it if they think they will make money from it. They don't care who writes it. They don't care who draws it. They don't care what you do. Hey, if it sells, if it makes money, they'd have Batman be a transsexual if that was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's transsexual and he's going to become a woman. He's going to go through it. If they thought that was actually going to make them money, they would do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is what driving. That's what driving this.
I think there's a very interesting. I'm not a super fan of what Zack Snyder has done with Superman and Justice League. But I will tell you this. I saw an interview with him where he was being told by Warner executives, do whatever you like. You can change the characters, you can rename them. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you like. And he was like, no, this is Clark Kent. He's Martha and Jonathan is the parents' names. I don't agree with how well he used all the characters, but he was at least like, no, this is the dynamic. It's got to be Lois Lane. It's Clark Kent. I'm not going to change anything.
You can say what you will. I mean, he is a fanboy. He is a fan of his characters. That he took the wrong lessons from them. Well, it's his interpretation. I mean, the text is created by the reader.
Yeah.
That is the way he reads those stories. That's the way he reads Watchmen, and that's perfectly fine. He tried his best to make it very faithful to the Alan Moore maxi series. And that is basically what he did. What he tried also with this. Superman, Batman fight. Let's find a reason for them to fight. But at the end of the day, he had a love for these characters. And now we're getting into the tail end of this development, because now after this bright spot with Justice League, we get the very, very dark times. And this is really the dark times. This is the 90s. This is Azrael coming in. This is the Nightfall storyline. I mean, this is really where it really lost a lot of readers, I think. Gained a new crop of readers, angry white boys in the suburbs. and who were also listening to rap at that time, because a lot of people forget this was the angry generation and bored kids, and it couldn't be extreme enough. We're getting to this point in a second, but this is where it's going. This is the other end of the stick.
Well, it's still going in that way.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
As you know, we get a new character, that was introduced outside of the line, in his own book, The Vengeance of Bane, right? Then we get into his master plan. He takes out the OG Batman and Bruce Wayne, but then we get a Psycho replacement in Azrael, that may, Dumas, I forget his first name. And all of a sudden he's a psycho. He goes beyond the morals of what a Batman should be, armors himself up. I mean, dope look though. I always liked that look. I loved it. But it was this week, and then to see, what happened. Why didn't it stick to you guys? Why did they have to bring back Bruce?
Because this is shit.
Yeah, because I mean, who in their right mind thought that Batman would be out forever? I mean, this is always also when we talk about, Dave and me talked about the female Thor, Jane Foster Thor. Who in their right mind, who was a real comic fan, really thinks this is really going to stick forever? I mean, all these people who hue and cry on YouTube and wherever else, they're totally disingenuous. If they're comic fans, they're totally disingenuous, because this is not going to stick. This is only for a period of time. I mean, the same is Crisis on Infinite Earth. Eventually, they brought back the Silver Age in a certain way. I mean, this is always coming back.
Yeah, yes. But I mean, again, you've got. I mean, I love Kelly Jones, and this was just such a I could think of probably a dozen different projects you could have put Kelly Jones on that would have been absolutely fucking amazing.
I was looking at very, very early Kelly Jones art. We talked about Hero Alliances. He worked on that too. Very early Kelly Jones art. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, he was their best artist. I mean, incredible. You could already see his talent. Unbelievable artist.
But I mean, it's like Nightfall. It's like, Bane was created to actually be a joke, and it kind of like they kind of had to force him into, he was supposed to be like a thug, like just basically some dumbass, and all of a sudden, like they went through this period where he's like super smart and super intelligent and like some sort of criminal mastermind. It's just like,
yeah. I see it.
And it goes to show it's very difficult to. It goes to show that it's very difficult to write intelligent characters, because also when you look at the movie Bane in the Christopher Nolan movie, that was not an intelligent character. That was really not an intelligent character.
But you know what? It was. But you realize that
he was to die.
Right, but he was under the influence of Talia.
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea of Bane being somebody's stooge works perfectly. Bane being his own, being a criminal mastermind, just doesn't work.
No, and what bothered me though, at least in the film interpretation, is again, Bane is supposed to be a Latino character, and we got somebody totally not Latino to play Bane that actually couldn't even talk either, apparently. So
do you know what?
But he's also not drawn Latino.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like I could
shades,
I don't know. I mean, I honestly can't tell. I couldn't even guess to what apart from Bane, I have no idea what his name is. So I don't know what his background is. I don't know. Has he ever taken his mask off?
Possibly. That's a good question for 13 Crusader, which is a huge Batman fan. And now, you want to talk about change. They've currently introduced in the Joker book Bane's daughter. Like all this stuff when he's had to get laid.
Well, hold on, but look, we've had Joker's daughter, we've got Batman's son, we had
Two-Face's daughter.
Yeah, so everyone's got to have a kid at some point. It's just the most boring.
What's the matter? We can't birth boys anymore in comics.
No, but it's just.
We have Damien, don't we?
But it's this boring trope of let's just. Oh well, hey. We don't know what to do with this character more. Hey, let's just introduce their offspring. Offspring? When do they have an offspring?
That's the modern aging. They don't age them physically all of a sudden. Let's age them, by experience. All of a sudden they have a kid. Okay, yeah.
I mean, I've never really watched the Gotham TV show, But the idea of having younger versions of the characters is not a bad one.
Yeah.
No,
And this is Rob Liefeld saving the comic book industry. Here we go. I mean, talking about change. I mean, it is change. I mean, this is giving the disenfranchised, white, rich, middle-class kids of the 90s what they were craving for. This is extreme. This is really rocking the boat. No longer stories that made sense, but art that was an image, and it really put image.
Art that didn't make sense either. But
yeah, that's true. That's true.
But it was. I mean, look, what it did do is a lot of them were looking at investment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, basically, the image guys were seeing what was happening at companies like Valiant. You know, Jim Shooter was way ahead of the curve with the variant covers, the gold covers, all of that. He was ahead of everybody. So when it came to the guys, it was basically, it's like, here's a bunch of guys who they'd become very popular over a bunch of characters that they wouldn't have become popular if they hadn't worked for Marvel. So it's like, oi to you too, mate. But it's, you know, and it's like, and outside of Savage Dragon, none of the books actually made sense. Like, here's Youngblood. Youngblood was basically Rob Liefeld decides, okay, I was doing a bunch of mutant characters over at Marvel. So guess what? I'm going to give you something that looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Jim Lee did the same thing. I've been drawing X-Men. I'm going to give you something that looks like X-Men.
I mean, if you want to go to the next slide, we already see the X-Men influence on image. Here we go. That's X-Men for you.
But that's all they could do. It's like literally like, I'm going to, I was doing the X-Men. I'm going to give you the X-Men. And unfortunately, the problem was that you realize that other than the artwork, Jim Lee hadn't actually brought anything to the X-Men. And Wildcats, anything decent with Wildcats was actually done by Alan Moore again. You know, he came in and did a few issues to try and make some sense of it. Let's not forget,
Brubaker also did great in that universe. When he did not Incognito, what was the other thing he did? What was the other series he did? I can't remember the name, where he did 2 runs on 12-issue runs. Spun off Wildcats. Great series. I can't come up with the name.
Oh, God. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I have a very, very, very recollection of it.
Great series. I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny that out of all this, obviously, you know, this was bought off by DC, purchased it, you know, and that.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 are the only characters that I actually still see to this day in DC Comics.
Oh, who?
Zealot,
Grifter, and Voodoo.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Zealot has been around. They actually have thrown it against Wonder Woman, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. Well, those are the only ones I've ever seen exist. That's it.
Yeah.
I like the book.
Because they are the most. Because apart from Zealot, who is clearly a ripoff of Wonder Woman, but Voodoo and Grifter are fairly interesting original characters.
Yes,
well, Grifter's basically a masked Punisher.
Yeah, he's also a little bit Wolverine, but still he's an interesting in that he's paranoid and going up against an alien invasion. He has some interesting elements to him.
Right.
Oh yeah. There we go. Classic.
That's the classic first issue. I mean, that's sold and sold and sold. Many people do not remember this. And this was the curse on the New 52. Because a lot of these guys came back for the New 52. I mean, Lee was clearly the director here. He was steering this. And a lot of this felt very 90s when the New 52 hit.
But I think this was, you know, when we talk about how Image shook up comics, which they did very obviously, very clearly. And I'm not sure if you was being sarcastic when you said, Chris, when you said that they shook up comics for the better, because I don't think they did. I think
they shook up. I think it's a twofold thing. They shook up comics in the way that they really force the industry to look at itself, but it's also in a way, and if this is interesting because eventually they did the same thing as Marvel and DC, but they gained a lot of freedom. And when you look at what Image is today, it's a haven for creator-owned comics.
Oh, I mean,
and this is brilliant. This is important.
No, what's the home that they've given a lot of creators today is the best thing out of Image. What they did do here was there was a lot of fans that they managed to completely alienate, because what happened was they encouraged their fans to buy a case of every issue. Like people were buying entire boxes of Spawn, boxes of this, Wildcats #1. And once it took a while, but once they realized there was no value to that box of comics, they weren't going to change. They weren't going to. That's when, see, those fans, what happened was they stopped buying comics. They didn't just get rid of those comics. They just went away. And it was in partnership with Wizard magazine. Wizard would overinflate prices because it would be like, I'm literally like, I can pretty much guess that someone like Rob was like, hey Gareb, on the next issue of Wizard, could you, I'll tell you what, if I give you an exclusive cover, will you bump up the price on Youngblood's #1 in your price guide? Oh, sure, well, no worries. Yeah. And lo and behold, like, wow, the value's gone up, but no one actually wants to buy it. Like,
no. Dude, I bought the whole 4-issue miniseries of Youngblood for $1.
Yeah.
Each. And condition. And the thing is, that opened up the whole Image superhero universe. You get the first Supreme out of that. Youngblood. I mean, you got a lot of first appearances within that first 4 issues.
Image United.
Yeah.
Which was never finished.
Never.
And it's official. It was official years ago, but it's never ever going to be finished. Forget about it. Don't hope for it. Don't ever expect it. It's never coming.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, this is also. I mean, this is really what was really bad for Image. This unreliability.
I mean, literally, look, the best thing out of Image, like the best thing Jim Lee did was he gave people like Travis Charest a home and allowed him to develop. Like the thing
J. Lee also, and
J. Lee, I mean, like people like J. Scott Campbell. It was like there he is. He's down in La Jolla with the rest of the rest of the Homage Studios, the Wildstorm crew, and they all would hang out. They'd all work in the same studio space, and they're all learning from each other, learning from Jim. Jim would come in, show them tricks, show them how to do certain things, and that was the best thing that Jim did.
And you can still see it. If you watched, the Image Revolution, the documentary, you can still see a lot of these guys, Dan Frager and so on, they still have a lot of love for Jim Lee, for what he taught them. And with Rob, it's always, it's about the money. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. No, I mean, Jim Lee brought in a lot of guys that wanted to draw comics, and he helped them develop and really gave them a chance.
He was a door opener. That's
he was.
He's not dead. I mean,
he could have been at the right company. He could have been like a new John Romita, like someone in the bullpen who would help artists, train artists. That's what he could have become. And I think that's what he would have probably been better. In the end of the day, that would have probably been what he'd have been better suited for. Wouldn't have made as much money as he had. But I think the industry would be better off with him taking a role like that.
Yeah, that's why I picked this book from the New 52, because among all these books they put out, and even had a Hark and Dorf book by Rob Liefeld for why, who knows, didn't last long. They had a GI book, whatever they had, and there was a lot of crap in the New 52. But there were also this was when Scott Schneider really got to the forefront, and Jeff Lemire. And these guys are still begging it out today. And Jeff Lemire, Animal Man was such a great fresh book. If you go to the first page, next page, this was
my favorite.
Look at this. This is a DC comic. This together with Swamp Thing by Scott Schneider was really these were really outstanding books who came out of the New 52. Unfortunately, everything gets wiped with the same brush today. It was all shit. No, they had some genuinely fresh, interesting ideas here among the masses of uninteresting comics they put out.
But can you imagine though?
It was awesome.
Yeah, but can you imagine though if they'd taken the approach of like, okay, you've got your monthly Batman and Superman, but with something like Animal Man, just said like, we're going to approach this as Jeff and Travel. You've got like we're just going to do. I want you to think of series of volumes of say 48 pages, but we're going to do oversized hardback, just like European graphic novels, and we'll publish them each as you finish each one.
And this feels very much like a European graphic novel. And this had to have a huge influence on the Hawkeye series by David Ayer, because it's beat to beat very similar in its layout, in its visual representation. And it's such a lovely book. For the first couple of issues, this book was so outstanding.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And, I love the whole run, the whole family dynamic that they build, the extension, the red, the green, all that. I was Jeff and loved in it. This was to me the most bomb series out of New 52. Again, Animal Man, thing, and even that time was fire.
There's also another reason why creators leave books. This was why Trevor Foreman left the book, because he had a family tragedy and said, I can't draw this stuff for a while. This is too dark for me. You have to respect that, unfortunately, and his career never recovered from that, because this was the book he was born to draw.
Well, I think if you look at some of the issues he drew, that's not a type. That artwork isn't something. You can't do that on a monthly basis.
No,
it was
you can't do it, and you can't do it on a superhero book, because they tried to do it on of all titles of Birds of Prey. That was a disaster. This was his genre.
Yeah, one of the artists that they put on the book afterwards was Steve Pugh, who'd worked on Animal Man originally with Grant Morrison, and he was great. Like his stuff is again, if you really have to have something on a monthly basis, and obviously family tragedies aside, if you'd had someone like okay, we're going to do 6 issues with Travel, then 6 issues with Steve Pugh, then 6 issues with Travel, then 6 issues with Steve Pugh. You could have got something like these many arcs of 6 issues. Yeah. It would have been wonderful. It'd have been great.
What we also should mention that they did away with Vertigo at that time, because they took Swamp Thing out of Vertigo, everything out of Vertigo, and this would have been a great Vertigo book. A lot of people forget this. Brian K. Vaughan didn't work with the same artist on Why the Last Man for the whole run. There was also other artists coming in, and that's how we do it. You could do it on a Vertigo book and tell the same story.
And I love how you say that about the art style.
I love this book.
Even with the Swamp Thing, you had Yannick Paquette on it. That's also an art style you can't do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's
unbelievable.
Crazy.
Yeah, those two books were fantastic. And talking about change again on the Marvel side, this is Spider-Man, part of the Fantastic Four. All of a sudden, he tried out 40 years earlier, and finally he mixed it into the Fantastic Four.
Well, isn't this the Fantastic Foundation or something? That's the FF stands for, not Fantastic Four.
Foundation.
Great book by Jonathan Hickman. Where the wizard also had children. It was also interesting.
There you go.
Interesting concept.
Every villain has to have their children to fall back.
Yeah, but they were all part of this future foundation, because they were gifted children, and they were all. You had Valeria Richards, who was kind of leader of the team. They had these kids who had adventures. It was kind of fun. It was a great series, and Epting was killing it on that book.
I love the look for Spidey here, though. That's a great look.
So hold on. Man. So is that not Sue Storm on the cover then?
It is Sue Storm.
Okay.
But you also had Valeria, who looked like a mini Sue Storm.
Right, because I mean, I'm looking at it, and Reed doesn't quite look like Reed, other than the fact he's got stretchy, like one of those arms just disappears off.
He's grabbing somebody.
I mean, he was. We will also have another cover by Epting. He was doing these painted covers as a sort of thing at that time, and the characters didn't really look like their counterparts on the covers.
Right.
You also see Captain America cover in a minute, which is also very much in that vein. But talking about ideas and storylines, I mean, this is what we have today. Conan works the Earth today. I mean, talking about ideas recycled.
What if?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had this whole run. I had it at one point. This and the second volume, the complete run.
Oh, it was really great.
Yeah, fantastic books, man. And this is funny because obviously, I'm a big Conan. When I saw this, I was like, "Yo, this is really crazy." And this is, very much in the late 70s, early 80s style of Conan.
Yeah.
New York, gangster. And now we have him, as you said, in Savage Avengers, walking the.
That's why I picked. That's why I picked it, and because it leads into the next one, which is exactly where we are next.
I want to say this though. I think that having Conan here in the modern times really hurts the character for me. I mean, I'm not really enjoying the I get it, Conan, but Conan it's not for now. And this, man.
Yes, of course.
But
this is where we're going with this.
Yeah, but I see, just going back to Conan for a second, it's that thing of how far are we away at Disney and Marvel? How far are we away from having Darth Vader show up in an Avengers or Fantastic Four comic?
If Conan showed up, Darth Vader will show up somewhere against the Avengers. That's what's next.
I mean, why not? I mean, we're at that stage now where why not? Like,
they're going to incorporate Alien, Predator, and Star Wars all in one comic.
Yeah, have Darth Vader versus Conan.
Yeah, but what seems logic is to have the Guardians of the Galaxy cross over with Star Wars. That seems logic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's see. But this is so funny. What's the mystery? Who's the new Thor? Who's the new Thor? I mean, they told us many years ago who the new Thor is going to be.
Of course. And everybody got their panties in a bunch because, Thor can't be a woman. Why not? Who cares?
What?
Does it really matter? I mean, it doesn't really matter because what matters is if the stories are good.
And the hammer itself doesn't say needs to be a man. Whosoever holds this. Whosoever.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is right now. This book commands a lot of money out of that run.
Of course it does.
Of
course it does.
And because here we go.
Yes. And you still have fanboys crying over this. And why? I don't understand this. Let somebody else. I mean, nobody had a problem with when Beta Ray Bill was Thor. But I think a woman.
I think the issue comes when it's like we are so used to these being corporate-owned characters, and the corporations want to keep them going. It would have been good to what's wrong with taking Thor off the table? Just saying okay, Thor's gone. But what we're going to do is for a while we're Jane Foster is now Valkyrie. So why couldn't you have made her Valkyrie right out the gate? She's Valkyrie, or make her another character. Create a character that she can be. And because I know that everyone's a part of it is deliberately stirring controversy. They want the controversy. They want anything that it's like Donald Trump in a way, in that it doesn't matter. He doesn't care. He doesn't care that half the country and most of the world is talking badly about him. What he cares about is they're talking about him.
Yeah.
And again, I think Marvel deliberately is playing its audience by deliberately ghosting them, gaslighting them, when it could have just simply, do you know what? They've done it before in the past. Okay, Thor's cancelled. He's going to go off for a while because he's had a really rough time. He's literally going to have a mental breakdown if he doesn't just go away somewhere.
Or he goes on a journey, whatever.
Yeah, and at some point later on, we can find out what the journey was, or what would even be nice is for him and Sif to go, do you know what? We're going to go to Bali, fuck our brains out for like, a few weeks, and screw the rest of the world. And in the meantime, Odin's going to power up Jane Foster so that she can, if anything goes wrong, she's going to take care of it.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, she does a great job. And when Thor wants to come back, he's like, no, she's holding the hammer. It's worthy. She doesn't want to give it up. So you got to find something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, why not? And I mean, get some great stories. Get some great stories out of it. Try something new. Shake things up. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, over here they cut off his hand. He became unworthy. I mean, wild stuff. Which is cool.
Oh, I see. See. There was a story I did with Simon Bisley, and it was basically it was Thor. We didn't come out right and call him Thor, but at least I can't remember if we did. But it was Thor, and what happened was this: he's fighting these giant, like, werecats on this alien planet, and one of them he's holding a hammer about to hit one of them, and another one just bites his hand off, has the hammer in his mouth as well, and it just falls down into a gully, down to its death, into a crevasse, and so he's no longer got an arm or his hammer.
Wow.
And so the idea of giving him a robot arm, so we did that back in 1988, 89, something like that.
Wow.
Did you leave those people laying around somewhere where these guys saw it?
It was quite popular because we got a cease and desist letter from Marvel, and because our character was called Max Carnage, and they were, and at the time Marvel were just starting to promote a new character, new villain, a line on Spider-Man or whatever, Carnage.
Yeah.
And they tried, and we basically told them to go fuck them. We basically told them to go fuck themselves, and never heard anything back from them.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't not no little kid here. I ain't scared of you. Get out of here with your shit. Love it.
It's like,
good on you, brother.
Yeah, you do not have a character called Max Carnage, and you do not have a character. It's Thor with a robot arm. So,
love it.
Come after us with that. And let's talk about the history of Captain America a little bit, because when we talk about change, this was Captain America, the forgotten period in the 50s. Captain America was never frozen in ice, didn't you know? Because Captain America just stopped for a while publishing, and then what did you do? And this is John Romita working on Captain America in the 50s. And Captain America was now fighting the commies, because this was what you did. And this was the attempt at a relaunch of Captain America. And you can say, oh, this lasted only for 3 issues. No, but it's not true. Romita did Captain America for 12 issues, because there was also a New Men magazine. They called it New Men. And Captain America, Namor, and the Human Torch came back in the 50s. And they kicked some ass. And the character that outlasted them all was Namor, because Namor was the most popular one. And to this day, I think it was because you had a very attractive man in just his swim trunks, and there was a lot of girl readers around. And he looked non-threatening at that time. He was very lean. He had the figure of a swimmer. And I'm sure the girls kept Namor afloat for a while longer, versus Captain America was really not hitting it right with this commie smashing thing he had going on.
So,
and Romita,
so the girls,
I mean, interesting.
So the girls were floating Namor's boat.
Oh, they were. he was floating theirs, I think, apparently. I mean, it's talking about this. I mean, I'm sure there was also a lot of boys who were into Namor at that time for different reasons. I mean, sure, you had a near naked man. Why not? Actually, that's the cover. That's the comic you're going to buy.
Actually, looking at this cover, the villain there looks very much reminds me of the Radioactive Man, who was also Russian.
Yeah, and it was also a time when Stan Lee was not above to steal from himself.
That is cool cover though.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
And this is interesting because this is the first issue of Captain America, even though it says number 100, because that was the crazy renumbering they had going. So they converted another book into Captain America that was
Tales of Suspense.
Tales of Suspense, and he got his own book. And what's so interesting about this issue, this continues from the previous issue, and Black Panther, storyline is Second Wakanda. Black Panther is very much the co-lead in this storyline. He's very small on the cover. He's very much in the background. I mean, this is Captain America. He's the guy. Of course, it's his book, but still, Sharon is very small in the background, and the Avengers are small in the background. But even Black Panther, who is in the issue, he is not on par. He was Cap. And this is, of course, a very famous issue because talking about change, Captain America hates his country. He feels betrayed. That's the end of the original Secret Society storyline. And Secret Empire storyline. No, he's no longer having it. He's no longer Captain America. He's giving up the mantle. And interesting stuff going on here in the counterculture, the awakening after the counterculture. That's Watergate. And this is jumping into the early aughts, as the kids say. And who we have as Captain America? Bucky. And he's shagging up with Black Widow. It's so crazy, isn't it? I mean, Bucky is now the new Captain America. Who would have thought?
Yeah, I thought he was Captain Puerto Rico because his suit really looks like the Puerto Rican flag. I was like, what's going on here?
I mean, I love Alex Ross, but that was not a good costume.
Yeah.
And nothing against the flag of Puerto Rico, but it was a horrible costume.
Yeah.
No, I didn't like the costume, but I'm saying the look, that's the first thing I thought. I said, that's not Captain America.
Captain Puerto Rico.
Yeah, man, Captain Puerto Rico. I mean, and salute to all my Puerto Ricans celebrating the Day Parade today. Much love, mi gente. Stay safe.
But I really like that run. And we're getting to where we wanted to go. Captain America, Sam Wilson, Captain America. And why the F not? I mean, why not?
A change that makes sense. Again.
Exactly. He was his partner in the 70s. He was the Falcon in the 70s when they hang out together in Harlem in the Kirby run. I mean, Kirby didn't create him, but he was very much an integral part of the Kirby storyline and Kirby run. And this is why not? He's taking on the mantle.
Yeah, no, Kirby.
Well deserved.
Kirby did a very his writing on that run with the Falcon in it. He really touched on. There's some really good scenes in those comics where he really touched on some very interesting stuff, really highlighting the difference between Steve Rogers' background and Sam Wilson's.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Hanging out in Harlem, and you had Sam Wilson had a very militant girlfriend at that time who was fighting for the rights. He wanted to tread more lightly. She was more aggressive about things. I mean, Kirby was doing that stuff. Yeah. And we are in 2021 now, and this is too difficult. This is too hard to swallow for some. I mean, what kind of progress have we made? I mean, not only America, in general.
Well, the problem is, I think the problem is still, we are, sorry, but we're a bunch of old comic book fans.
Definitely.
We've grown up with all these characters, and it's only fine. It's like, comics have fought. Sometimes they've embraced change. So when you talked about Spider-Man earlier, when Spider-Man, he left school, left college, he's now teaching. He's a teacher. He's living with Mary Jane. There was that whole sequence which got swept completely under the rug, which was when she was pregnant.
Yes.
We never found out about the kid. Sure, okay, have this, but acknowledge it across the run, of all your books, having people age. We've seen, Kitty Pryde, for instance, we've seen Kitty Pryde mature.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, at what point, you're holding back some characters, you're letting some characters age up. At what point do you realize that, hey, Kitty Pryde's older than one of the other characters that she used to be the kid to? Like,
Mhm.
you know, you're like, just agree that, like, just say, okay, every 5 years is in Marvel Comics is 1 year in our world, something like that. But let them age. Let them
5
age.
Yeah.
Yeah, let them them age, and then let them change. And if you do that, then you can make way. That's, you know, Miles Morales as Spider-Man makes sense if you're going to let Spider-Man go back to where he was. He was at school. He's a school teacher. He's older, just like in the Spider-Verse. It's like, Spider-Man in that is older. He's the older guy. He's got a bit of a belly.
And out of shape, man. He loves beer, apparently.
Yeah. So why not have Peter Parker he doesn't have to have the beer belly and eating pizza every night, but you get what I mean. It's like he's an older guy and he takes the much younger Miles Morales under his wing. And it's like, look, we can both be Spider-Man. Like, that would be cool. And like, wow, awesome. And then you're naturally bringing in the next Spider-Man. And you can do that. Like, do that.
It feels
Sam
like
Wilson is the new Captain America. Yeah, but at the same time,
being passed. I don't just not like names being given out. I don't know if you know this. Maybe a couple years ago, Power Girl. You know, I'm no longer gonna be Power Girl. There's other girl around. I mean, if you read the storyline, this girl was not around very long. Like, just an issue. Oh, no problem. You could be the new Power Girl. Like, you're just gonna give your name up to somebody you hardly know? I mean,
that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But Sam Wilson actually made sense, and that's part of Captain America's lore.
Right.
And in that it made sense. And I mean, the people who complained about this, people who find it very hard to swallow this, go back to the first cover of Captain America Comics #1 from the 40s. Who is punching Captain America in the face? Hitler. Would Kirby like this? Of course he would. Kirby would have made Captain America black if he would have been able to at that time.
The only thing I'd like to see is this point where, like, let's have more characters originate for their own reasons as a person of color to become a certain character rather than just take on somebody else's mantle.
Yes.
Let them have a name that means something to them rather than, I mean, I know it's like, you know, it's because, you know, for those, spoiler warning, for those who haven't watched The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the new Captain America, the Falcon, actually has a pretty good speech at the end in the last episode that he gives when he talks about, like, why he's now Captain America and why he should be. And it's almost as though he's not waiting to be given that title. He's taking it. He's taking it because if a black man is going to wait for something to be given to him, he's going to die.
Yes. He's going to wait all the time.
Well, it's like, I mean, and I thought that was great, bringing in the original Super Soldier, the original Black Captain America, and having him be someone who just like, I'm just going to be silent. I'm just going to tend to my garden. And the fact that Sam Wilson's like, yeah, okay, I can see why you made that choice. I'm not. I am going to take this. I'm going to take it because I'm not going to wait to be given it. I'm going to take it. That was a great Sam Wilson. Like, you know, that if that was, I mean, again, I said I don't read Marvel, DC Comics. I don't really read Marvel Comics either anymore. But if that was what the Sam Wilson in the comics was, I'd pick that up.
And I still, I mean, going back to in the same vein, I still like the Watchmen television show, how it opened with the riots, which really happened. You can go back in history. These race riots happened. They were really shooting blacks from biplanes. I mean, in America in the 20s, it's crazy. And making Hood Justice a black character. I mean, it's a brilliant idea. Why not? It expands on the mythos. It's not stepping on Elmo's toes, but it's doing stuff you couldn't probably do in the early 80s.
But what I would like to see,
opened up a conversation about Tulsa, though. People actually learned about that because of that show. A whole new generation.
Yes.
So served a great purpose for real in opening people's eyes up as to what's going on. And like you said, making him the Hood black. I mean, and him hiding himself, if you will, as a hero, because
and with that noose around his neck, how powerful is that? I mean, Jesus.
Yeah.
It was a great show, man.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go.
Mean, just once again, I mean, this is white America, black America, and they can be united. Why not?
Yeah,
it's a shame. I think that it would probably have been more interesting. I mean, I'm not. I've never been one to say that, like, look, you don't have to be black to write a black character, and you don't have to be white to write a white character.
Right.
But I think this could have been one of those. It would have, if they'd had a black writer on when this book started. I think it, like, you don't have to have the second cover where Captain America and Falcon don't talk to each other anymore.
Yeah,
they're
right.
And I think it's the TV show got it right in that. I think Steve Rogers would have been proud of Sam for taking up the mantle of Captain America in the end, and for giving that speech and for doing it for those motives. Yeah,
that's probably also some progress we have in 10 years since that comic came out.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is also Kubert's run on Tarzan.
Well, the reason I added these images at the end, because I thought, Chris, you put together a great selection of images, and all this was doing was I wanted to talk about a couple of things. This was DC Comics trying to do a different genre, and it's trying to do a different genre on the back of a very well-known property. Because out of this, I don't think without DC doing Tarzan, I don't think DC would even tried doing Rima. Which was a really beautifully drawn book.
Yeah,
well put together book. Nestor Redondo's beautiful artwork. We'd never have had that without Tarzan. But what it was also, and this is indicative of the problem I think comics face, is it's a corporation again trying to keep up on something else. It's like here, look. Tarzan's been around. It went from DC, went to Marvel. It's
been passed around like a cheap boy.
Was Dynamite. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like it's just somebody else with the license again, because they've got a character that's like they might be able to get an extra 1,000 sales on. And it's just like, well, like Tarzan should be. I mean, the stories of Tarzan are in public domain right now.
Yeah.
So why not just let it fully go into public domain? Like, let people do whatever they want with it. Because we've kind of had the best period, really. It's,
I'm pretty certain. I spoke to the creator last night on the Yena Wepa with Dodgy, and he was talking about, his whole Quickstarter project is using public domain and adding some new characters. But apparently there's a couple of characters out there where the public domain is 90% and 10% used. The thing is, they never tell you what that 10% is. So it's like, do I either revamp public domain character completely, or how can I do this?
Well, so for instance, I think it was, I'm tempted to say it was Dark Horse, but they did Princess of Mars, which was they reprinted the text book with illustrations by Mike Kaluta, but they didn't get the rights for that because the book itself is in public domain. Okay. And it's the same with like Zorro, for instance. Zorro is in public domain. The problem, and Tarzan's in public domain, John Carter's in public domain, Sherlock Holmes is in public domain. The problem is that there's still estates around that have trademarked the name. What you can't do. So Dynamite did this a couple of times. They did, I think they called it Jungle Lord, and it was the stories of Tarzan. And the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate tried suing them, and I think they came to an agreement in the end about it. But technically, Dynamite was in the right. I don't think they wanted to fight the issue legally, because I think it would cost a lot of money, because again, a lot of these lawsuits, like, they proved that Zorro was the someone has the trademark for Zorro. They went to court and they lost because because the reason is, they was like, well, it was proved, no, Zorro is actually in public domain, and all you're trying to do is just actually spoiler, like, go off and make a movie, go ahead, but you can't control everything with that character that is in public domain. So technically, there's a lot of these characters there is no problem with you using. Like, I did a graphic novel like 7 years ago called The Weirding Willows that had Alice in Wonderland, Dr. Moreau from the island Dr. Moreau. I had The Wicked Witch of the West. I had Dr. Jekyll. I had Badger, Toad, Ratty, and Mole from Wind in the Willows. And I also had Peter Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny.
Oh, no.
And the Frankenstein monster.
Oh, okay.
And I'd found because I did my research on the books and the material and when it was written. So I created a book that utilized the characters that were written and presented at that particular time frame. So I did a more older Alice, because at the time I set the story, Alice would have been about 18, not 9. So it was the stories of Alice after all of those stories. Oh yes, and I also had Mowgli from the Jungle Book in it. I'll send you both a copy of it. But but the point is, I created a world that all of these characters perfectly fit in, and I didn't mess with them. I didn't like. They are kind of my versions of the characters, but none of them contradict the source material.
Excellent. Gotcha.
But you can, and in the second, I'd already started work on the second book, which one of the things that I'm going to be doing in the near future is I'm revamping that particular property. I'm redoing the first book, and I'd started work on the second book, which did in fact use John Carter and Deja Thoris. But as long as I don't put them on the cover, and as long as I don't do a book called John Carter, technically, legally, I'm okay.
Interesting.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
And here's a big change, right? During the Crazy Planet of the Apes. What if somebody did something different?
Oh yeah, but this is
also interesting because it's set in the DC universe, because he comes across Superman's uniform at some point.
Yeah, which is used. It's that the basis of the short movie they did that was on the recent DVD.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the DC one.
Yeah, that's a nice little. If you can track it down, you should watch it, Chris, because it's a nice little story. It's only like 15 minutes, but it's kind of an amalgam of different issues of Commandy, but mostly the core of it is that issue of Commandy that has the Superman costume in it.
Yeah, so they tie it to the universe.
Yeah, but it's really nice. But again, Commandy was something that at first wasn't tied into anything, standalone, and it was again Jack Kirby and DC wanting to try something different, and it worked. But I think the flaw of American comics is there's so many good titles that people publish, and then they run out of steam, and then they bring on other people to reboot them and rework them, and they're never quite where they were. So I just think it was like, wouldn't it be great to just occasionally to just box it off, to just say, you know what, Jack Kirby's finished on Commandy, let him finish off the last couple of issues the way he wants it, and that's it.
Yeah.
And these days, you can now just say, well, we're just going to keep it in trade form, and it's always going to be available.
Well, what's so interesting about this is the longest running Kirby book at DC, and still they don't do not much with the character. Of late, they had a little bit of the Commandy challenge, and they had this animated short, obviously. But the New Gods, they have been milking forever now, which was the books that got cancelled earlier, because they were allegedly not selling. It's so interesting, isn't it?
Well, what's interesting is that they're not really milking the new gods; they're milking Darkseid. And
but
again,
also the other characters. Yeah.
and again, if you look at it, I've not seen anybody, and I even say John Byrne. Like John Byrne did a really good attempt, but no one's actually been able to follow in Kirby's footsteps. That like if you're a fan of the Kirby material, no one, and I say no one, has actually been able to sort of give even something that's like a nice taste. The closest to it is the X-Men Teen Titans crossover. Chris Claremont and Walt Simonson did a great Darkseid. His appearance in that crossover was great, but otherwise, no one. I mean, I know you like Tom King, but I don't think he's actually ever read an issue of Mr. Miracle.
No, it seems
before he wrote that.
I'm not.
No, I mean,
actually, I haven't read that series because I really heard so many bad things about it, and I wasn't in the mood, or I haven't picked it up yet.
Yeah, I mean, but but again, that's me as a fanboy. And Kirby gave those characters away. They're owned by DC, so DC can do whatever they want. I just like.
Well, I do want to say this: that Commandy apparently his future self is Tommy Tomorrow. Did you know that?
Well, that was that when we were talking earlier about Crisis, and like I said to you, there was a little disappointment at the end when you know that the certain characters wouldn't appear again. It was knowing that Commandy was Tommy Tomorrow, and was just like,
yeah,
no more. I was just immediately like, no more Commandy stories. Oh well.
But again, Final Crisis kind of explained the whole Earth, after the disaster AD concept that birthed the idea of Commandy, because he was called after the command base D.
Right. Yeah.
So Final Crisis explained that. You could read Final Crisis and go right into the Commandy run from back in the day and be like, oh shit, I have a complete story here. I know what happened.
Isn't that name thing something that appeared earlier? Didn't you also?
Oh, that was in. If you look at Commandy #1, it's in there. He talks about his grandfather, and you can see Commandy is on the wall. Yeah. So no, he that was there from the very beginning.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Another great Neil Adams cover.
But again, this was like an example of, see, when you're outside of comics, and it's how comics used to be, was, hey, martial arts is the new hot thing. Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. Let's do a magazine about Kung Fu. Now, when your sales drop off and interest declines in Kung Fu, you just stop and you do something different.
Yeah.
Stop trying to force things beyond their sell-by date.
But it's also the interesting thing here, which we always hear about these big corporations buying these little companies. This book would not have existed if Marvel hadn't sold a perfect film, because Martin Goodman was dead set against these magazines. They canceled Savage Tales after the first issue, and this was coming out under Cadence Film. When they said, no, we have our own distribution now, we don't have to rely on DC's distribution company anymore. This is Curtis here, there's a Curtis logo. Yep. We have our own distribution. You can put out magazines as long as they sell. And that's what they did. Roy Thomas was the editor-in-chief then and said, well, let's go on this Kung Fu trend. And as long as it lasted, it was great.
What can't you see on that cover?
A Marvel logo.
Yeah.
Yep. Nowhere. Does it say Marvel? Exactly. And yet we know that this was my first Puerto Rican hero from Marvel. It was introduced in this particular title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although they modeled him after who it was, Perez, I believe.
Yeah.
They modeled because they say, he's Puerto Rican they knew in the office apparently. So they modeled the character of Victor Ayala after him. But I hate the origin story.
Didn't he draw the first appearance?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But but the idea was modeled after you because the only Puerto Rican. But I hate that origin story. He's just walking down an alley. The daughter of the dragon had thrown the gem. This Puerto Rican is walking. Oh man, what's that? Oh, this looks cool. Puts it on. He transforms into the white tiger suit. I'm going to call myself the white tiger and fight. Like, get the hell out of here. The first thing that Puerto Rican would have done was try to hawk it.
But if you even though you didn't put a Marvel logo, on this, this issue 22 and 23 of this magazine has an interesting story by Chris Claremont and Marshall Rogers, where the daughters of Dragon are hooked with heroin and then sold to white slavery, or slavery, not white slavery. And this is this, you could never do that in a regular Marvel book. No. And it was a very powerful, interesting story.
But I agree with you, Al. It's like, you know, you've got all these other characters who have these, they fight hard, like Iron Fist. He, for years and years and years, he fights, he earned the Iron Fist. And then, of course, for the Puerto Rican guy, it's like he just finds it in the alley.
Yes.
It's like, come on, make the guy fight for it. Make the guy fight for it a little bit.
You know, honestly, there's no white tigers in PR, so no Puerto Rican would ever name themselves that. They probably name themselves Coquico, you know, after our national frog or some shit, you know?
Yeah.
just saying.
Wow. Unbelievable. Yeah, interesting.
I'm messing around. Oh, wow, this is a gorgeous.
Yeah, but it's, yeah.
Why is
again,
this here? What's the change?
See, no, the change here is format. Like this was, they're playing with format. They're trying to increase. They needed to increase the cover price, but they want to increase the value, or at least the perceived value. So it's like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make it 100 pages. There's all this reprint backup story in there, but there's a new story at the front. There you go. This was what the whole, we're going to give you this extra value. And I, for one, enjoyed it when I was that age. Like a lot of the stories I just thought I knew were old and was like, and it wasn't the artwork I didn't mind so much. It was like the writing was clunky. It was just obviously written for a different time, but I still appreciated it and I still bought them. Like sure, it was twice the price, but I didn't care. But it was, you know, it was like all self-contained. Like you could sit there, read it front to back. Wow. Okay, great. And I think
everybody
that, again,
here, I'm concerned about this guy because damn, he's gonna freeze to death.
That's Black Condor. That's Black Condor. That's the Native American character. He doesn't need clothes. He's Native American.
Yeah. See, but you can't tell from there. Like,
yeah, you can't. You can't. And is that Red Tornado over here?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
You got the Black Racer up there as well.
Yeah, right there. Mm-hmm. So, who are these guys over here? Is that Richard Dragon or something?
What is that? Oh no, that's it. Kid Eternity.
Oh, Kid Eternity.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I forget what his side the guy he used to sort of use this sidekick with, but
is this a boo-boo? You got Hawkman and Hawkgirl here, and you also got him here.
Where? Oh yeah,
it's true. Absolutely true.
Neil Adams must like Hawkman.
He must have smoked that day. It just happened. Like,
yeah, that John Broom stuff was potent.
Yeah.
He got so fucked up.
Probably got him some peyote cactus. Mm-hmm.
That's funny. But this is a great looking cover. Okay, so this changed format.
But
wonderful.
Yeah. So and again, this is the Shadow's here for the same reason that Tarzan was here. It was like, hey, okay, want something different? Let's go to the pulps. You know, it's like let's do something that's what inspired Batman. We all know that pretty much. You know, the Shadow was who inspired Batman. So why not get the rights for the Shadow as well?
Yeah, great issues. This were with Kaluta and Wrightson.
And DC and DC's run on the Shadow has never been equaled. Like Kaluta and Frank Robbins
and Bernie Wrightson.
Well, I think he only inked one.
And he did one issue, I think. He did one issue with pencils. Did he only ink? I cannot remember.
I'm pretty sure it's just he inked out, because don't forget this was at a time when a lot of the guys like he would have helped out.
Yeah, he was in the same studio. They had the same studio.
Yeah.
Oh, what an amazing time. I mean, those guys.
The Demon.
Barry Windsor-Smith and Kaluta. And Wrightson. Who was the first guy in the studio?
It was Catherine Jones.
Oh,
Jeff Jones.
Catherine Jones.
Jeff
Jones. Yeah, right.
Look at this. The ordinate. I had this baby too. I had bought this like for $3 at a convention. Oh
Yeah.
man.
But you see, it's like the Demon was I still say it was a uniquely Jack Kirby book. And it's like, I've not seen anyone, like, people have done their interpretations of the Demon, but
Yeah.
I just, that run, I've never, I quite liked, he cropped up a couple of times in Brave and Bold. That was drawn by Jim Aparo.
I think so Kirby was very leaning into Gothic horror at that time, and his art was perfect for that. The long shadows. The architecture. Brilliant.
The architecture when statues would come alive and that type of thing. That was just, that was really, really cool. And yeah.
Kirby was ahead of his time here too, because this is DC's first rapper.
Oh yeah, but he wasn't rapping in those. He wasn't rapping with Kirby, was he?
No, it came after.
Great art though. This is Kirby, man. I love this cover. I mean, that's the first. When I saw this, I didn't care what number it was or anything. I was like, oh man, I love the look, and I had to buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this,
that's another one. Yeah, that's another one.
I mean, we saw, what's that?
What's the change in this though?
It was like again, it's trying. It's like, okay, romance comics are on their way out. Hey, let's mix it with horror.
Yeah, they were doing these Gothic romance novels, basically, which are very popular at that time.
Yeah, so they were trying to mix it up. You had, I mean, it's worth hunting down the company Tomorrow's Publishing. They published a collected Kirby book last year that had an issue of what was going to be the first issue of Soul Love, which was a black romance comic.
Great book. I've seen Kirby's original art on that.
Yeah,
it was with Tony DeZuniga, I think, also worked on this.
He inked one of the stories, but a lot of the if you buy the book, you'll see a lot of it's uninked. It's still the pencils with lettering on.
Whoa.
And True Divorce Stories was another one.
True Divorce.
Yeah,
that is for Kirby. I mean, he invented the romance comic book, so why not true divorce stories? Here you go.
I think one of the first stories he did was like one of the first divorce stories he did in what was going to be in that first issue was one where it's literally the couple literally like almost immediately remarry. Going through divorce. They've realized they were still in love with each other, and it was they get over whatever it was they were going through. And
that wasn't why. The dude knew it was going to be cheaper to keep her, so he just did what he had to do to try to.
But also
two years later they were pulling her out in parts out of the fridge.
Yeah, but it's not so unusual. Liz Taylor and Richard Burton married twice, so did Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner. I mean, it's not so unheard of.
Yeah, exactly.
And there you go. That's the end of the presentation, though. All this stuff, bro. Awesome job, guys.
So there's change. There has been change. We've all the change a lot of people have talked about. We've had it. We've had a lot of that change, and it's like you can point at things again. It was like the whole Captain America Hell Hydra thing. It may not have been a well-written story or whatever, but it's certainly it's not the first or last time that's ever happened with Captain America or any other character. So
you could also point to the Death of Superman storyline. I mean, it's always when you hear creators talk about the storyline today, they all chuckle and say, "Well, everybody took us by our word," but people who read comics knew Superman would come back.
But that lets good thing because we got we had the black version of a Superman kind of come in Steel. We had the introduction of a new Superboy. What's the other guy? Vindicator. What was his name? Vindicator. I forget his name.
But you see, I look at that as being so. What you've done is rather than sort of instead of Steel being a craft him out of literally have a original black character become Steel without a Superman S on him, become sort of like this. No, you've made him you've made him a Superman character, which takes away some of his independence. It's it's not quite the same, but it's like when we talk about Bronze Tiger and like finding the it's like, oh, I'm going to be a superhero because I found these magic.
Oh, that's White Tiger,
crystal.
not Bronze.
White Tiger, Bright Tiger. Sorry, but
Bronze Tiger's first appearance was with Richard Dragon. Master of martial arts. We have White Boy, the master of martial arts. What was it? Right? Richard Dragon, master.
That's what we got. Same with Iron Fist.
Yeah,
they couldn't make him an Asian character. That was later, Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
Yes, later they did it. But it's kind of crazy and interesting.
But it's just each of these times was you're taking something and not making it as cool as it could be, and not giving it its own independence.
Yeah,
like it's always got to be in the shadow of somebody else. It's like, oh well, you wouldn't if Superman hadn't died, you couldn't have been this.
Yeah,
let them be a character in their own right for their own reasons.
I think that you could get what you want there, not in comic format, but with the Superman story. So it still shows up there, and his reasons for actually donning a suit is totally opposite. It's like Superman fucked up my world, and now he figured out a way. Like, I know I could defeat this guy.
Which is so great about Kirby's original Black Panther, because he was original. The movie took this away, because in Kirby's world, he was original. He was the first Black Panther. There was no mentioning of a mantle being passed from the father to the son.
Yeah,
and that was really he was in control. He was rich. He had the power. And it's quite interesting, and I kind of love what they did with him. Also, I mean, we could talk about the guys like Don McGregor who came in and who took this concept and put him into Harlem as well, a black man, and he was attacked by a white woman when he wanted to save somebody, and oh no, he's a black man, we can't have that, and yeah, powerful stuff there.
Don McGregor fought the grain a lot. Bud from No Price Podcast had the pleasure of speaking to him. And hosting actually, and he was talking about everything. I mean, he did the first lesbian kiss in comics, and he was getting pushed back. He was told that there's not enough white characters in the Black Panther comics, so he does a story, Black Panther versus the KKK. They're like, how the hell are you gonna do this?
Yeah,
they were fighting too much. He said, infighting at Marvel with what he wanted to do, that he didn't really have the freedom. Everything was a problem. And he was really trying to being who he was from up north and being in a very diverse community. He understood, this is what the world is. But but didn't have it.
Well, it's when you try to be. That was probably Don McGregor fighting against political correctness. In that Marvel thought, okay, well, we've got to have a black character. We should have a black character, but just one, and and all his supporting cast should be white. It's like,
homie, do you live in New York? Have you been to New York and seen how people were hanging out back then? Like, nah, that was very rare to see, people like that hanging out together. Rare. Because if you did, then somebody's up to something. Unfortunately,
right. But I think that again, it's when I said as far as will we ever have change? It's substantive change where the whole ethos, the foundation of what comics are being produced. And I think what we're seeing is change is coming. It's not coming at the moment to Marvel and DC so much. They're toying with the peripheries of it. They're sub-licensing, or they're working with Scholastic on certain lines of books and things like that. But I think what you're seeing more is, and I think where the future of comics, at least American comics, is Kickstarter. It's enabling people to find their own voice. It's, several people I saw the other day, someone had tweeted out like, man, Herb Trimp would be killing it on Kickstarter today.
Oh my God.
Imagine if Kickstarter, imagine if Kickstarter had been around in the late 60s. Like, imagine if Jack Kirby did the New Gods on Kickstarter.
He would have told Marvel, "Fuck you! I'm gonna do this on my own," and then he would have been banking like a mother for sure.
Yeah.
And he had to retain all the rights, have the licenses and everything. Wonderful.
His family would have been set for life, son. For real.
Yeah.
Well, they
I mean,
are.
it's great.
But, how long did that take? How long did that take?
Well, I would also argue that I think if Jack had got full control, I think he would have at least lived a couple of extra years, because I think that if he'd had that control, it's like being given things like superpowers to draw, which it was like, I'm glad that DC was giving him work, just as I'm glad that they gave Kurt Swan's, they was giving him little tiny drips of work. He did like a Mask miniseries, the Cops comic, things like that. But yeah, it's like if he'd just been allowed to just continue with the New Gods and things like that, that would have been such an amazing sort of, I mean, we're all amazed. We keep going back and we dig into those, that like literally it was just a year and a half's worth of books, but there's still so much to be found in there, and obviously DC obviously dig down into it often enough.
Well, I like those type of creators, though. I respect those type of creators that they say, let's utilize pieces of the past to do a good story now. I mean, it's like you said, it's a gold mine if you're willing to take the time to dig.
Yeah,
it's a gold mine.
Yeah,
I love it. Me, I accept change, man. I mean, I learned the hard way because if you could see, folks, what we've been speaking about, every character has gone through change. So the character you love had gone through a change prior, and they keep changing going forward. So it's just a matter, enjoy the ride. Be happy that these characters exist.
Exactly. Judge the stories on their merit, and just say, well, basically, was it a good story I enjoyed or not? Doesn't really matter. The other thing doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Perceive it as a multiverse. That's all. It's a story from another planet. There you go. Who cares? And enjoy it. This is what and if you don't like it, you don't need to bash it. Don't buy it. You speak with your pocket and your mouth. Some of you have a bad mouth on you, and that's not nice. Like as Chris mentioned earlier, and David is a creator himself, and Chris is a writer. You know what I mean? And I'm a content creator. It's like, why are you dissing for it? Unless you're doing, be constructive if you are going to criticize. Constructive.
Yeah.
In a way, please. That's all I ask. People say, why don't I bash books and stuff like that? There's no need to. If I'm not talking about it, it means I don't like it, right? That's all.
It's like I have a policy, like I leave a lot of reviews on Google. Like if I go to a restaurant I like, or a cafe or something I like, I'll leave them a review.
David, T-shirt, and then oh no, it's David. Everybody, best service.
But it's I make a point of only leaving good reviews, because if I don't like it, I'm not going to leave a review. I'm not going to rate it. If it's worth going to, I'll rate it. So
there you go, folks. I mean, it's okay to like what you like, love what you love, man. But at least try to keep the awful criticism away. No one needs more negative energy in the world. We're trying to build a very positive environment here, because again, comics are for everyone. And again, it's not something right. Please go visit the indie comic book universe. There's everything there for you. Everything. So if you don't like the direction of the big two, go to the premiere. If you don't like the premiere, go to the indie. You guys got 3 goddamn choices nowadays.
Yep.
Keep it real, folks. So, Chris, before we go, any updates on the book? How's that going?
Yeah, it's going great. Hopefully done in a few weeks.
Yay! And what about you, David, man? Any updates you want to share? Or everything's just going good?
Everything is going good, but I've got, it looks like my new graphic novel, the artist is starting work on it next week.
Yay.
So
hopefully in a couple of weeks we could tease something.
Hopefully.
Maybe. Yay.
Hopefully soon.
So you are in a lucky position. You can share artwork. I can't share artwork. I cannot do that.
But you're more than you're so good with your words, mate. You're not going to have a problem.
We'll see. I'll put out another teaser shortly.
There we go. All right, and folks, you know what to do. Please visit your Google Play Store today to download the Comic Crusaders app, which has all the goodness of Comic Crusaders all in one place. You know, our YouTubes, our podcasts, our website, and even a comic book shop coming soon that Lucas from It's Drunken Chat. So soon we're going to have a little retail section. And of course, if you're an independent creator that's looking to get some distribution, please contact us, and I'm going to point you over to Lucas because he has figured out a way to also help you guys sell some books. All right. And of course, visit ComicsCrusaders.com, visit undercovercapes.com, our extended podcast family. You know what it is, and make sure to follow us, ICC on CC on Twitter, and of course the International Comics Crusaders on Facebook. All right, there we go, folks. This was a hell of a show, and I hope you guys kind of maybe expand your mind a little bit and see the changes that have been going on. And again, like I said, your favorite character has been changed before and will continue to change. So just enjoy the ride. All right. So with that, I'm Al Mega with the big homies, Chris Buse, Dave Elliott, and once again, yeah, man. And once again, a salute to my fellow Puerto Ricans out there celebrating the International Puerto Rican Day Parade. Again, be safe and be on your best behavior, por favor. All right, wepa, and I'm out.
Bye.